They are the fortresses of power, secrecy, and silence. Some are carved deep into mountains, others hidden beneath luxury hotels or remote islands. A few are so heavily guarded that no outsider has ever seen what lies inside. And while their official stories talk of safety, defense, or science, their reputations are haunted by darker possibilities. Tonight, we're going to step inside the world's most restricted places, from bunkers sealed under stone and steel, to secret vaults beneath cities, to islands you'll never set foot on. These are the locations you're not supposed to know much about, and the mysteries that keep them so heavily protected. So wherever you are right now, settle in and get comfortable. You can watch along with the visuals or just let this play in the background while you go about your evening. Either way, we'll guide you through these places step by step. And with that, let's begin our journey into some of the most heavily guarded and secretive locations on Earth. Starting high in the cold Ural Mountains. High in the Ural Mountains of Russia lies a peak that at first glance seems unremarkable. Mount Yamantau rises just over 5,000 ft, surrounded by forests, rivers, and valleys that stretch across the region. To a casual hiker, it might look like just another mountain, but for decades, it has been one of the most closely guarded and secretive sites in the country. Beneath its rocky slopes, satellites have caught glimpses of sprawling construction projects, tunnels carved into the earth, and evidence of a vast underground complex. And yet, ask the Russian government about it, and you'll receive explanations so mundane they only deepen the mystery. At different times, it's been described as a food storage warehouse, a mining project, even a safe vault for cultural treasures. But none of those stories quite match the scale of what has been happening there. The rumors first began during the Cold War when Western intelligence agencies noticed unusual activity around Yamal. Large excavation sites appeared on satellite images, new rail lines were laid, roads extended into remote areas, and heavy construction equipment moved in and out of the mountain. All of this was unfolding in a country already famous for building elaborate bunkers and secret cities to prepare for nuclear conflict. When the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, rather than fading away, the work at Yamantau accelerated. This raised even more eyebrows in the West because if Russia was strapped for cash and struggling with political chaos, why pour precious resources into digging out a mountain? The only conclusion many could draw was that it must be vitally important. What little we know suggests a place locked down more tightly than almost anywhere else in the world. The skies above it are restricted. Commercial aircraft are forbidden to fly over. Roads leading into the area are monitored, and military patrols enforce the boundaries. Journalists who have attempted to get close describe being stopped, questioned, or simply turned away well before reaching the base of the mountain. Even locals who live in nearby regions know not to ask too many questions. The secrecy doesn't just surround Yamantau itself, but extends to the communities that support it. At least one town in the area has been closed off entirely, populated only by those connected with the facility, invisible to outsiders. It's as if the mountain has grown its own shadow society, existing solely to guard whatever lies inside. So what could possibly require this level of protection? The theories are numerous and none can be fully proven. The most widespread idea is that Yamaha is a vast nuclear bunker designed as a continuity of government facility. In the event of nuclear war, the Russian leadership could retreat into its depths and survive perhaps for years while the surface burned. The mountain's remote location, combined with its massive excavation work, certainly lends weight to this idea. Some intelligence analysts believe the complex could shelter tens of thousands of people equipped with its own supplies, water systems, and power generation. If true, it would be less a bunker and more an underground city, waiting silently for a day everyone hopes never comes. Others suggest it may be more than just a refuge. Perhaps it functions as a weapons development center, hidden away from prying eyes and satellite surveillance. If a state wanted to work on new forms of nuclear weaponry, biological agents or other experimental technologies, what better place than a facility buried under thousands of feet of rock? A mountain like Yamantau would shield sensitive projects from detection, both physical and electronic, while providing layers of natural defense against attack. Even whispers of such activity are enough to make foreign governments uneasy, especially given Russia's long history of secrecy in military research. There are also quieter theories that it is a strategic storage site for important state treasures, documents, or valuables, perhaps even a cultural archive meant to survive catastrophe. But if that were the case, why maintain such heavy military presence decades after the Cold War? Why guard it with the same intensity today as during the years of nuclear standoff? The mismatch between the simple explanations and the overwhelming security is what fuels suspicion that Yamaha's true purpose is far more serious than anyone admits. One of the most intriguing aspects is timing. Much of the construction detected by satellites occurred in the 1990s when Russia was facing extreme economic difficulties. The country was struggling to transition from the Soviet system, plagued by shortages and political turmoil. Yet even in those lean years, resources were poured into this mountain project. For many analysts, that was the clearest signal of all. Whatever Yamant was, it was considered absolutely essential. Some argue that building it was Russia's way of ensuring that no matter what happened on the world stage, the state could never be completely destroyed, even if everything else collapsed. There would be a secure nucleus hidden underground, ready to preserve continuity. Trying to imagine what lies inside inevitably leads to speculation. Could there be vast chambers carved deep into the mountain, filled with stockpiles of food, water, and fuel? Underground rail systems linking it to distant points across Russia? Dormitories, hospitals, command centers, and communication hubs capable of running the country in secrecy. Some even suggest entire farms or hydroponic gardens might be concealed there, making the complex self-sufficient for decades. The lack of any credible leaks only makes these ideas more plausible because if such facilities exist, they would be under the highest classification, sealed away from even casual insiders. Of course, there are those who believe its purpose is even more sinister. Rumors persist of laboratories hidden in the depths where weapons of mass destruction could be engineered without oversight. Others whisper about it being a nuclear arsenal vault, a place where some of Russia's deadliest warheads are kept safe from detection. The evidence for these claims is thin, but the possibility remains tantalizing precisely because no one can confirm or deny it with certainty. What we do know is that Yamantau has become a symbol of secrecy itself. Other countries have their mountain fortresses. America with its famous Cheyenne Mountain, Switzerland with its elaborate alpine bunkers, but those have at least been glimpsed by outsiders. Yamantau remains completely off-limits. No documentaries, no photographs from inside, no defectors sharing stories of life underground. Just the mountain, the soldiers who guard it, and the silence of a state determined to keep its purpose hidden. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part. In an age when secrets tend to leak, when satellites, journalists, and whistleblowers have exposed much of what governments try to conceal, Yamantau has endured as an enigma. It stands as a reminder that some mysteries are still possible even in the 21st century. If it truly is just food storage or a mining project, the question is why the Russian government would continue to shield it with such intensity. And if it's something more, something designed to ensure survival in the event of catastrophe, then its continued secrecy may be just as important as the facility itself. For now, the mountain sits quietly in the Urals, its secret sealed beneath tons of rock and layers of armed protection. Those who live nearby see it every day, but even they don't know what lies inside. To the rest of the world, it's little more than a name on a map and a cluster of theories that grow more elaborate with every passing year. Yet, the truth is out there, locked behind blast doors we'll likely never see. Guarded by men who will never talk. And so we're left to wonder, is Mount Yamatau still Russia's most important hidden fortress? Or is it concealing something even greater, something the world isn't ready to know? From the frozen slopes of the Urals, our story takes a sudden leap across the globe. Out of Russia and to the very heart of Europe, to a city-state less than half a square kilometer in size, yet holding secrets said to span the whole of recorded history. Vatican City may be tiny, but within its walls lies one of the most heavily restricted collections of documents on Earth, the Vatican Secret Archives. Picture this. Beneath the Apostolic Palace, in a climate-controlled warren of vaults and corridors, there are over 50 miles of shelves stacked with manuscripts, ledgers, scrolls, and records. 50 meters. That's enough to stretch across an entire city. It's said to contain around 35,000 volumes, some dating back more than 1,200 years. The collection is so vast and so carefully guarded that even the church itself doesn't always know the full extent of what's inside. On paper, the archives are a straightforward repository. They hold papal correspondence, records of Vatican diplomatic treaties, church council minutes, and centuries of financial accounts. If you wrote a letter to the Pope in the Middle Ages, there's a chance it still sits there today. Among the treasures known to be inside are documents like the 1521 decree excommunicating Martin Luther, the records of the trial of the Knights Templar in the early 1300s, and the letter Henry VIII sent in the 1530s begging the Pope for an annulment from Catherine of Aragon. These are not dusty relics, but pivotal moments in world history, frozen in ink and parchment. And yet the allure of the archives lies less in what we know is inside and more in what we don't, because access is highly restricted. For centuries, the Vatican simply did not allow outsiders to see them at all. That changed only in 1881 when Pope Leo XIII permitted qualified scholars to consult specific documents. But even today, the rules are extremely tight. A researcher has to be vetted and approved. Even then, they are allowed into only a small portion of the archives and only for very limited study. You can't just walk the corridors and pull volumes at will. Instead, you must request a specific file, and if it's approved, it is brought out to you under supervision. Photographs are forbidden, and notes are closely monitored. For a collection spanning 50 meters of shelving, most of it remains completely closed off. That secrecy naturally fuels speculation. After all, if the archives are just records, why such control? Why the vaults, the armed guards, the rigid rules? This is where myth and history blur. For centuries, people have whispered that the archives contain hidden gospels, accounts of Christ's life that were suppressed to preserve official doctrine. Others claim prophecies lie within, predicting apocalyptic events the church dares not reveal. Still others insist the archives hold proof of extraterrestrial contact, demonic manifestations, or even instructions left behind by ancient civilizations. To believers in these theories, the Vatican isn't guarding history, it's guarding the world's biggest secrets. The myths are helped along by fiction and pop culture. Dan Brown's novels, films like Angels and Demons, and countless documentaries on secret societies have all played with the idea of forbidden knowledge locked away in Vatican vaults. The truth, of course, is more complicated. Scholars who have gained access say the archives are less Indiana Jones than filing cabinets. The bulk of the material is mundane correspondence, receipts, administrative records. But even that raises the question, why not open it all up? Why maintain this aura of mystery when most of the content is harmless? The Vatican's answer is that the archives aren't meant to be hidden for secrecy's sake, but preserved for security and conservation. Parchments from the Middle Ages are delicate, easily destroyed by mishandling or exposure. Restricting access protects the material from damage or theft. And yet the very name Archivum Secretum Apostolicum, Vaticanum translated as Vatican Secret Archives, has done more to fuel conspiracy theories than perhaps any other. In Latin, secretum simply means private, but in modern languages it took on a darker connotation. The Vatican has since tried to rebrand them as the Vatican Apostolic Archives, but the original name is burned into popular imagination. Among the stories that keep the mystery alive are persistent rumors of documents describing lost books of the Bible. Some claim that texts like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Thomas, or even more obscure writings were deliberately suppressed and hidden. A few of these texts are known from discoveries in places like Nag Hammadi, Egypt, but conspiracy theorists believe many more remain locked in the Vatican. Then there are whispers of prophecies, letters from saints or seers foretelling catastrophes, including the so-called Third Secret of Fatima, which was only partially released in 2000. Critics argue the Church may be holding back darker predictions, perhaps of global war or societal collapse. Others stretch the theories even further. UFO enthusiasts insist that correspondence exists between the Vatican and world governments about extraterrestrial encounters. Some point to the Vatican's interest in astronomy. After all, it operates one of the world's oldest observatories as evidence that the Church knows more than it lets on about life beyond Earth. Fringe writers have even suggested the archives might hold physical evidence of such contact. Fragments of spacecraft, reports of sightings, or accounts of encounters kept hidden to prevent upheaval. One of the more persistent legends is that the archives contain proof of demonic visitations, grimoires or occult documents seized and hidden away over centuries. During the Inquisition, countless texts were confiscated from accused heretics, witches, and scholars dabbling in forbidden arts. Where did all those manuscripts go? Some surely were destroyed, but many believe the most dangerous were catalogued and stored away, sealed from public eyes. Imagine corridors lined with volumes of sorcery, never to see the light of day again. Of course, mainstream historians caution that most of this is fantasy, but even they admit the archives contain many files the world may never see. Not because they're shocking, but because they're simply not prioritized for release. For every famous trial record, there are endless files of tax records, diplomatic disputes, or notes about local parishes. And yet, the tiniest chance that something extraordinary lies in those unopened shelves keeps curiosity alive. After all, with 50 mi of shelving, who can say for sure? There have been rare moments when the Vatican has allowed glimpses inside. Journalists occasionally receive short, carefully staged tours, usually showing the most innocuous documents. Beautiful illuminated manuscripts, papal decrees, centuries-old letters. These tours rarely dispel the mystery. If anything, they heighten it. For every one room shown, there are hundreds kept hidden. Even scholars who have studied the archives for years admit they've barely scratched the surface. What adds to the allure is the timeline. The archives don't just cover church history. They intersect with the entire history of Europe and beyond. Medieval wars, Renaissance politics, the rise and fall of empires, all are reflected in papal correspondence and records. In many ways, the Vatican archives are less about religion and more about power. To some, that makes them the ultimate repository of history itself. And if you control history, you control the narrative. Occasional personal accounts add human texture to the story. Researchers who have been allowed inside often describe a surreal experience. Walking through hushed corridors where time feels suspended, handling parchment that once sat on the desk of a medieval pope and realizing they are among the few in modern times to ever touch it. One scholar described finding the original trial transcripts of Galileo complete with the annotations of the inquisitors. Another recounted opening a folder to find the letters of Michelangelo, negotiating for payment while painting the Sion Chapel. These glimpses confirm that extraordinary treasures are indeed within, even if most remain unseen. And yet the greatest draw remains the unknown. Perhaps the archives hold nothing more shocking than centuries of paperwork, or perhaps they conceal a single document capable of rewriting our understanding of history. That possibility is enough to keep speculation alive. The irony is that the more the Vatican insists the archives are mundane, the more people believe there must be something extraordinary hidden inside. Secrecy creates its own gravity. The less you see, the more you imagine. In the end, Whether it's suppressed gospels, alien reports, or ancient prophecies, the Vatican's secret archives may always represent something larger than themselves, the enduring human belief that somewhere, someone knows more than they're willing to share. After walking the hushed corridors of the Vatican and wondering what knowledge may still be sealed away, we turn again to Russia, this time to a place that very much exists, but remains equally closed to outside eyes. Not a hidden base inside a mountain this time, but an actual town, a place with schools, homes and streets, yet one you can't simply visit, even if you live in Russia. It's called Megori, and it might just be the human face of Mount Yamanou's mystery. On the surface, Megori looks like a typical small Russian settlement. Satellite photos show rows of apartment blocks, tree-lined streets, administrative buildings, and the trappings of an ordinary town. Except it isn't ordinary at all. The town is sealed off, guarded, and entirely closed to outsiders. Even Russian citizens need special clearance to enter. Mail is restricted. Movement is monitored. It's as though someone designed an entire city, then wrapped it in layers of secrecy. The history of Megori stretches back to the Soviet era, when the USSR was carving its landscape into zones of heavy industry, military infrastructure, and closed research hubs. Dozens of closed cities sprang up across the country, many of them centered on nuclear weapons research or missile production. Majora was one of them. Founded in the 1970s, it was purpose-built to support the sprawling underground works beneath Mount Yamano. While the mountain itself is strictly off-limits, the town exists as its visible counterpart, home to the people who keep whatever's inside running. Residents of Megori aren't random citizens. They're almost certainly military personnel, engineers, technicians, and their families. In other words, the kinds of people you'd need if you were maintaining a massive underground complex. Reports suggest the town houses thousands of... They are the fortresses of power, secrecy, and silence. Some are carved deep into mountains, others hidden beneath luxury hotels or remote islands. A few are so heavily guarded that no outsider has ever seen what lies inside. And while their official stories talk of safety, defense, or science, their reputations are haunted by darker possibilities. Tonight, we're going to step inside the world's most restricted places. From bunkers sealed under stone and steel, to secret vaults beneath cities, to islands you'll never set foot on. These are the locations you're not supposed to know much about, and the mysteries that keep them so heavily protected. So wherever you are right now, settle in and get comfortable. You can watch along with the visuals or just let this play in the background while you go about your evening. Either way, we'll guide you through these places step by step. And with that, let's begin our journey into some of the most heavily guarded and secretive locations on Earth. Starting high in the cold Ural Mountains. High in the Ural Mountains of Russia lies a peak that at first glance seems unremarkable. Mount Yamantau rises just over 5,000 ft, surrounded by forests, rivers and valleys that stretch across the region. To a casual hiker, it might look like just another mountain, but for decades it has been one of the most closely guarded and secretive sites in the country. Beneath its rocky slopes, satellites have caught glimpses of sprawling construction projects, tunnels carved into the earth, and evidence of a vast underground complex. And yet, ask the Russian government about it, and you'll receive explanations so mundane they only deepen the mystery. At different times, it's been described as a food storage warehouse, a mining project, even a safe vault for cultural treasures. But none of those stories quite match the scale of what has been happening there. The rumors first began during the Cold War, when Western intelligence agencies noticed unusual activity around Yamal. Large excavation sites appeared on satellite images, new rail lines were laid, roads extended into remote areas, and heavy construction equipment moved in and out of the mountain. All of this was unfolding in a country already famous for building elaborate bunkers and secret cities to prepare for nuclear conflict. When the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s, Rather than fading away, the work at Yamato accelerated. This raised even more eyebrows in the West because if Russia was strapped for cash and struggling with political chaos, why pour precious resources into digging out a mountain? The only conclusion many could draw was that it must be vitally important. What little we know suggests a place locked down more tightly than almost anywhere else in the world. The skies above it are restricted. Commercial aircraft are forbidden to fly over. Roads leading into the area are monitored, and military patrols enforce the boundaries. Journalists who have attempted to get close describe being stopped, questioned, or simply turned away well before reaching the base of the mountain. Even locals who live in nearby regions know not to ask too many questions. The secrecy doesn't just surround Yamato itself, but extends to the communities that support it. At least one town in the area has been closed off entirely, populated only by those connected with the facility, invisible to outsiders. It's as if the mountain has grown its own shadow society, existing solely to guard whatever lies inside. So what could possibly require this level of protection? The theories are numerous, and none can be fully proven. The most widespread idea is that Yamaha is a vast nuclear bunker designed as a continuity of government facility. In the event of nuclear war, the Russian leadership could retreat into its depths and survive perhaps for years while the surface burned. The mountain's remote location, combined with its massive excavation work, certainly lends weight to this idea. Some intelligence analysts believe the complex could shelter tens of thousands of people equipped with its own supplies, water systems and power generation. If true, it would be less a bunker and more an underground city, waiting silently for a day everyone hopes never comes. Others suggest it may be more than just a refuge. Perhaps it functions as a weapons development center, hidden away from prying eyes and satellite surveillance. If a state wanted to work on new forms of nuclear weaponry, biological agents or other experimental technologies, what better place than a facility buried under thousands of feet of rock? A mountain like Yamantau would shield sensitive projects from detection, both physical and electronic, while providing layers of natural defense against attack. Even whispers of such activity are enough to make foreign governments uneasy, especially given Russia's long history of secrecy in military research. There are also quieter theories that it is a strategic storage site for important state treasures, documents, or valuables, perhaps even a cultural archive meant to survive catastrophe. But if that were the case, why maintain such heavy military presence decades after the Cold War? Why guard it with the same intensity today as during the years of nuclear standoff? The mismatch between the simple explanations and the overwhelming security is what fuels suspicion that Yamaha's true purpose is far more serious than anyone admits. One of the most intriguing aspects is timing. Much of the construction detected by satellites occurred in the 1990s when Russia was facing extreme economic difficulties. The country was struggling to transition from the Soviet system, plagued by shortages and political turmoil. Yet even in those lean years, resources were poured into this mountain project. For many analysts, that was the clearest signal of all. Whatever Yamant was, it was considered absolutely essential. Some argue that building it was Russia's way of ensuring that no matter what happened on the world stage, the state could never be completely destroyed. Even if everything else collapsed, there would be a secure nucleus hidden underground, ready to preserve continuity. Trying to imagine what lies inside inevitably leads to speculation. Could there be vast chambers carved deep into the mountain filled with stockpiles of food, water, and fuel? Underground rail systems linking it to distant points across Russia? Dormitories, hospitals, command centers, and communication hubs capable of running the country in secrecy. Some even suggest entire farms or hydroponic gardens might be concealed there, making the complex self-sufficient for decades. The lack of any credible leaks only makes these ideas more plausible because if such facilities exist, they would be under the highest classification, sealed away from even casual insiders. Of course, there are those who believe its purpose is even more sinister. Rumors persist of laboratories hidden in the depths where weapons of mass destruction could be engineered without oversight. Others whisper about it being a nuclear arsenal vault, a place where some of Russia's deadliest warheads are kept safe from detection. The evidence for these claims is thin, but the possibility remains tantalizing precisely because no one can confirm or deny it with certainty. What we do know is that Yamantau has become a symbol of secrecy itself. Other countries have their mountain fortresses. America with its famous Cheyenne Mountain, Switzerland with its elaborate alpine bunkers, but those have at least been glimpsed by outsiders. Yamantau remains completely off-limits. No documentaries, no photographs from inside, no defectors sharing stories of life underground. Just the mountain, the soldiers who guard it, and the silence of a state determined to keep its purpose hidden. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part. In an age when secrets tend to leak, when satellites, journalists, and whistleblowers have exposed much of what governments try to conceal, Yamantau has endured as an enigma. It stands as a reminder that some mysteries are still possible even in the 21st century. If it truly is just food storage or a mining project, the question is why the Russian government would continue to shield it with such intensity. And if it's something more, something designed to ensure survival in the event of catastrophe, then its continued secrecy may be just as important as the facility itself. For now, the mountain sits quietly in the Urals, its secrets sealed beneath tons of rock and layers of armed protection. Those who live nearby see it every day, but even they don't know what lies inside. To the rest of the world, it's little more than a name on a map and a cluster of theories that grow more elaborate with every passing year. Yet, the truth is out there, locked behind blast doors we'll likely never see, guarded by men who will never talk. And so we're left to wonder, is Mount Yamantau still Russia's most important hidden fortress? Or is it concealing something even greater, something the world isn't ready to know? From the frozen slopes of the Urals, our story takes a sudden leap across the globe, out of Russia and to the very heart of Europe, to a city-state less than half a square kilometer in size, yet holding secrets said to span the whole of recorded history. Vatican City may be tiny, but within its walls lies one of the most heavily restricted collections of documents on Earth, the Vatican Secret Archives. Picture this. Beneath the Apostolic Palace, in a climate-controlled warren of vaults and corridors, there are over 50 miles of shelves stacked with manuscripts, ledgers, scrolls, and records. 50 mina, that's enough to stretch across an entire city. It's said to contain around 35,000 volumes, some dating back more than 1,200 years. The collection is so vast and so carefully guarded that even the church itself doesn't always know the full extent of what's inside. People, enough to operate the facility around the clock. Imagine living in a place where nearly every neighbor is somehow connected to the same top-secret project, and where no one can really talk about what they do. For those on the outside, it's hard to comprehend a community built on such restrictions. Western analysts sometimes compare it to the company towns of the 19th and 20th centuries, where workers lived in settlements owned and controlled by a single employer. But Mashoria is far more sealed off. It isn't just about providing housing near a factory. It's about walling off an entire town so that its activities remain invisible to the outside world. When foreign journalists have tried to approach Magori, they've been stopped at checkpoints well before entering. Even curious Russian travelers report being turned back or questioned if they stray too close. The mystery deepens when you consider what day-to-day life there might be like. Satellite images suggest Magoria has all the basics: schools, shops, medical facilities, community spaces. Children are born and raised there. Families build lives there. Yet all of it is under a veil of secrecy. Residents can't easily leave, and if they do, they rarely speak publicly about their time inside. It creates an atmosphere where ordinary life and extraordinary secrecy blend together in ways that most people will never experience. Some accounts from those who've lived nearby offer fleeting glimpses. Truck drivers delivering supplies speak of heavily guarded entry. points with convoys disappearing into the town only to emerge hours later, formless. Residents from other closed cities describe the culture as one of silence. Everyone knows not to ask too many questions, even about their neighbors. It's a world where gossip can carry consequences and where curiosity is actively discouraged. So what exactly is Maggiore hiding? The most obvious theory is that it serves as the living quarters for the staff of Mount Yamantau's underground complex. If Yamantau is a bunker, a weapons development site, or some other strategic installation, then Maggiore is the surface hub that sustains it. Its residents are the engineers who keep the lights on, the security personnel who guard the entrances, the medical staff who ensure readiness, and the families who make the place a functioning community. In this sense, the town is perhaps even more revealing than the mountain itself. You don't build an entire closed settlement unless there's something important to support. There are also more speculative ideas. Some claim Maggiore itself may have underground extensions with tunnels linking it directly into Yamanao. If that's the case, then the town could be the true front door to the entire operation, disguised as a normal community while concealing hidden access points. Others wonder whether Maggiore might host training or staging areas with recruits brought in under cover of ordinary residency. The town in this view isn't just a home base, it's an integral part of the larger hidden machine. What makes Maggiore particularly fascinating is that it hasn't vanished like some other Cold War relics. Many of the USSR's closed cities were eventually declassified or opened up after the Soviet collapse. Their roles diminished as budgets shrank, but not Maggiore. To this day, it remains sealed, guarded, and active. That suggests whatever it supports is still operational. If Yamantau were just an abandoned Cold War project, why maintain an entire town around it for decades? Why keep thousands of people tied to a place that supposedly houses nothing more than food storage or mining operations? Occasionally, rumors surface that hint at the scale of what Maggiore may conceal. Intelligence sources in the 1990s speculated that Russia was still pouring resources into Yamato and its surrounding facilities even during economic collapse. If true, Maggiore would have been at the center of that investment, keeping the human infrastructure intact. Some even suggest the town's population has grown rather than shrunk in recent decades, which would indicate ongoing importance for outsiders. Maggiore's existence poses an almost taunting mystery. We can see it on maps, spot it from satellites, and acknowledge it as a functioning community. Yet we can't visit it, can't hear directly from its residents, and can't know what lies beneath. It's a reminder that secrecy doesn't always have to hide in the wilderness. It can take the form of an entire town living in plain sight but forever closed to the rest of the world. And that leads us to the most provocative question. Is Maggiore simply the surface support system for Mount Yamantau? Or is it the true key to understanding the mountain itself? If Yamanao is the locked vault, perhaps Maggiore is the front door, guarded not by a blast door, but by an entire community living under silence. The very ordinariness of its appearance might be its greatest disguise. After all, what could be more disarming than a town where people go to school, shop for groceries, and walk their dogs, while just beneath something far larger waits unseen? Whatever the answer, Maggiore remains one of the most intriguing examples of a guarded place. Not because of what you see, but because of what you can't. A town with thousands of inhabitants and no open roads. A settlement that exists entirely in service of a secret. If Yamato is the fortress, Maggiore is its living skin, a surface world that shields whatever lies below. And if the mountain's mystery endures, it may be because Maggiore still keeps its gates shut. From a sealed-off town in the Russian mountains, we now travel out of Russia and into the deserts of the American Southwest. In northern New Mexico, tucked against the Jigarilla Apache Reservation, lies the quiet town of Dooley. On the surface, Dooley looks like any other small community. A gas station, a grocery store, a few motel, fewer than 3,000 people call it home. But ask around long enough, and you'll hear whispers that this little town sits above one of the strangest and most hotly debated underground facilities in the world. Some say there's a secret base beneath the Archer Mesa, a flat-topped mountain just outside town. And according to decades of stories, that base isn't just run by humans. The legends of Dooley really began to take shape in the late 1970s and early 1980s, when a curious mix of local reports and UFO conspiracy culture converged. Ranchers in the area had long complained of unexplained cattle mutilations, livestock discovered dead with surgical-like incisions, organs removed, and no trace of blood on the ground. Some animals were found with flesh that seemed cauterized, as if cut with a laser. While skeptics blamed predators or scavengers, many locals were unconvinced. The sheer volume of cases combined with the eerie precision of the wounds made natural explanations feel unsatisfying. Rumors began to swirl that something or someone was experimenting on animals in the New Mexico desert. At the same time, strange lights were being reported in the skies over Dulce. Residents claimed to see glowing orbs zipping silently across the horizon, darting and changing direction with impossible speed. Others reported aircraft that looked like helicopters but made no sound. For a town that should have been far from major military test ranges, it was enough to spark uneasy questions. Was the US government secretly operating in the area, or were these crafts not ours at all? The person who brought Dulce into the wider spotlight was an Albuquerque businessman named Paul Benowitz. In the late 1970s, Benowitz became convinced that he was intercepting alien communications from the area near Dool, an electronics whiz with a successful company supplying equipment to the Air Force. He set up antennas and recorders at his home, capturing strange signals he believed came from an underground facility. He also began photographing unusual lights in the sky, which he thought were alien craft entering and leaving hidden hangars inside Archuleta Mesa. Benowitz's claims escalated quickly. By the early 1980s, he was telling anyone who would listen that the US government was working with extraterrestrials beneath Dooley. According to him, this joint base extended 7 levels underground. The upper levels were run by humans, while the deeper ones housed aliens conducting grisly experiments. He painted a picture of vast hangars for saucer-shaped craft, high-speed underground trams, and laboratories where both animals and humans were used in tests. Perhaps most disturbing, Benowitz claimed to have evidence that some humans were being held in cages. His stories found eager audiences among UFO researchers and conspiracy theorists, but they also drew attention from the government. Some suggest that Air Force intelligence officers actually fed Benowitz disinformation, playing into his beliefs to keep him occupied and to muddy the waters of genuine classified programs. If true, it was a cruel trick. Over time, Benowitz became overwhelmed by paranoia and eventually suffered a breakdown. Yet his tales had already escaped into the wider world, inspiring a generation of Dowley-based lore. As the years passed, others added their own chapters to the story. In the 1990s, a former state trooper named Gabe Valdez, who had investigated cattle mutilations in the region, publicly stated that he believed something strange was happening around Dooley. Valdez didn't necessarily buy the alien collaboration angle, but he reported seeing military-style helicopters in the area without any identifying numbers, and even claimed to have found evidence of unusual craft in remote canyons. His testimony kept the flames of speculation alive. Then came perhaps the wildest element of all, the alleged firefight. According to certain accounts circulating in UFO communities, sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s, there was a violent clash between humans and aliens, deep inside the Dulce facility. One of repeated version comes from a man named Phil Schneider, a self-described former government contractor. Schneider claimed that while working on underground excavation projects, he accidentally stumbled into a chamber already occupied by extraterrestrials. A gun battle erupted in which several humans and aliens were killed. Schneider even displayed scars on his body, which he said came from an alien energy weapon. Skeptics have dismissed his story as fantasy, but among believers, it remains one of the most chilling pieces of Dulce lore. Descriptions of the base itself are remarkably detailed for something that has never been proven to exist. Alleged witnesses speak of elevator shafts descending hundreds of feet, underground hangars large enough to house multiple craft, and a sprawling complex of laboratories and tunnels. Each level supposedly has a different function: human housing, security, genetics research, crossbreeding programs, and even hybrid nurseries. While mainstream science dismisses these tales as science fiction, the persistence of the descriptions is part of what makes Dooley so fascinating. It isn't just a vague rumor of aliens underground. It's a whole imagined world with architecture, hierarchy, and history. Of course, the official stance is that there is no Dooley base. The US government has never admitted to anything of the sort, and skeptics argue that the entire mythology was born from Cold War paranoia, local UFO sightings, and Benowitz's unraveling mind. And yet the story refuses to die. Each new generation rediscovers Dooley, weaving in fresh sightings of lights in the sky, new cattle mutilations, and modern conspiracy culture. Internet forums are full of people debating the layout of the base, sharing supposed insider testimony, and connecting Dulce to wider theories about underground military networks across America. Part of what keeps Dooley alive in the imagination is its setting. Northern New Mexico is vast, remote, and already rich with Native American traditions and folklore about spirits and sky beings. Against this backdrop, the idea of a hidden base doesn't feel entirely out of place. To locals, the land has always been alive with mystery. Add in decades of unexplained animal deaths and persistent reports of strange aircraft, and it becomes fertile ground for belief. There are even occasional personal anecdotes that keep researchers hooked. Travelers passing through Dulce have told stories of seeing unmarked helicopters hovering silently at night. Hunters claim to have stumbled across unusual vents or grates in the wilderness, only to be chased away. Residents sometimes speak of friends or relatives who worked security jobs they could never talk about. None of these stories can be verified, but together they form a web that makes Dulce feel less like a hoax and more like a puzzle missing its final pieces. Skeptics often argue that Dulce Base is a perfect example of how conspiracy culture builds itself. One man's obsession, in this case Benowitz, spread through UFO circles, got mixed with existing cattle mutilation law, and then took on a life of its own. By the time the internet arrived, Dulce had already grown into a kind of modern myth, ready to be shared, expanded, and adapted by anyone with an interest in the paranormal. But even if it is just a myth, it's one that has endured far longer than most. That endurance raises a question. If Dooley is nothing more than fantasy, why does the story remain so powerful? Perhaps it's because it combines so many classic fears: government secrecy, extraterrestrial contact, and the idea that humans might not be in control of their own destiny. Or maybe it's because there are just enough unexplained elements. The mutilated cattle, the lights in the sky, the occasional strange encounter, to keep the door open for believers. Like all great mysteries, Dulce thrives in the space between what can be explained and what remains unknown. Whether it's an elaborate legend born of paranoia or the cover for something truly extraordinary, Dulce Base has earned its place in the canon of the world's most guarded and secretive places. And as long as people keep seeing strange lights and finding cattle they can't explain, the whispers will never fully stop. Leaving behind the dimly lit vaults of the Vatican, our journey now takes us far away, across oceans, across hemispheres, to the sun-baked heart of Australia. Here, amid the red deserts near Alice Springs, lies a facility so secretive that even many Australians don't know the full story. It looks like a cluster of oversized golf balls scattered across the desert floor. But in reality, this is Pine Gap, one of the most closely guarded joint operations between the United States and Australia, and often called Australia's own Area 51. Pine Gap was established in 1966 at the height of the Cold War, when the US and its allies were racing to expand global surveillance. Officially, it was described as a space research facility, a vague cover story designed to disguise its true mission. Even in Parliament, questions about Pine Gap were often brushed aside with technical answers that revealed almost nothing. For a long time, Australians had little idea that this quiet desert base was in fact a central node in America's signals intelligence network. Over the decades, it has grown into one of the most important surveillance sites on Earth. The setting alone adds to its mystique. Pine Gap sits in a remote valley hundreds of kilometers from the nearest coastline, surrounded by arid mountains and endless outback. The isolation is deliberate. The dry air and distance from urban interference make it ideal for intercepting signals from satellites orbiting above. And that's what those white domes, technically called radomes, are for. They house giant dish antennas shielded from prying eyes that track satellites, relay information, and scoop up electronic signals from across half the planet. What's known about Pine Gap's function today is staggering. It is a hub for collecting communications and radar data from satellites. It supports drone operations across the Middle East and Asia. It plays a key role in nuclear monitoring, missile defense, and intelligence sharing within the Five Eyes alliance. Australia, the US, the UK, Canada, and New Zealand. In other words, the domes in the desert are listening to a massive slice of the world's conversations, signals and movements, and feeding that intelligence back to Washington and CRA. Yet, the secrecy around Pine Gap has always fueled darker speculation. Restricted airspace blankets the facility. The perimeter bristles with cameras and motion sensors. Nobody without clearance gets close. And journalists who've tried describe being intercepted long before the gates. Some former workers have claimed the base extends underground with entire levels hidden beneath the desert floor. They describe secure bunkers, data centers, and possibly even living quarters designed to withstand attack. To many, the above-ground domes are just the tip of the iceberg. What really matters lies hidden beneath. Rumors about Pine Gap's underground facilities stretch back decades. Some suggest vast tunnels run beneath the base, linking it to airstrips or even other installations. Others claim the underground complex is large enough to house aircraft or advanced weapon systems. In UFO circles, Pine Gap has long been tied to theories about extraterrestrial technology. Much like Area 51, locals sometimes report strange lights in the night sky, objects that move far faster or more silently than conventional aircraft. While skeptics chalk these up to test flights or atmospheric illusions, the association between Pine Gap and UFOs has proven stubbornly persistent. Secrecy has even sparked protests. In the 1980s and 1990s, anti-nuclear activists demonstrated outside Pine Gap, arguing that the base made Australia a potential target in any global conflict. During the Gulf War and later the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, Pine Gap's role in guiding US drones and missile strikes became a focal point for criticism. Protesters scaled fences, held vigils, and demanded transparency. But the base carried on its true activities hidden behind official statements about defense cooperation and intelligence support. One of the rare glimpses into Pine Gap came in 2013 when the Snowden leaks revealed just how critical the facility was to US surveillance. Documents showed Pine Gap helped steer satellites that eavesdropped on communications across Asia, the Middle East, and even Europe. It wasn't just tracking potential military threats, it was vacuuming up vast amounts of data from ordinary people's calls, emails, and signals. To many Australians, this revelation confirmed what they had long suspected. Their country was hosting one of the most important listening posts on the planet, with very little public oversight. Despite the controversies, Pine Gap has also become a strange cultural symbol. In Alice Springs, you can buy postcards featuring the white domes. Locals sometimes joke about the men in suits who occasionally appear in town, blending in poorly with the dusty outback setting. Taxi drivers swap stories about Fing American workers back and forth. Their accents are a reminder that this is as much a US base as it is an Australian one. Some townspeople even report hearing deep, low-frequency rumbles from the direction of Pine Gap at night, fueling speculation about underground machinery or hidden construction. Historical accounts also add layers to the mystery. Declassified reports suggest Pine Gap was originally intended to monitor Soviet missile tests by tracking their infrared signatures from space. Over time, its mission expanded into broader signals intelligence, and today, it's considered indispensable to America's global surveillance architecture. But throughout its history, Australian officials have often been kept at arm's length, with the US maintaining tight control over what happens inside. Even prime ministers have admitted they weren't fully briefed on all of PineGap's functions. For a sovereign nation, that level of secrecy can be unsettling. For conspiracy theorists, of course, PineGap is a treasure trove. Some insist it is the command center for weather manipulation projects, pointing to strange cloud patterns or odd bursts of atmospheric interference. Others claim it is linked to subterranean bases across the globe, forming part of a hidden network of tunnels and bunkers. And in the wildest versions, Pine Gap is portrayed as a joint human-alien facility where advanced technologies are tested far from public scrutiny. While there's no evidence for these ideas, the sheer secrecy of the base makes it easy to believe that anything could be possible behind those fences. What keeps Pine Gap so captivating is the tension between what we know and what we don't. On one hand, it is clearly a vital part of US and Australian defense, bristling with technology that tracks satellites, monitors threats, and enables warfare across distant continents. On the other, the tight restrictions and the vast desert isolation make it feel like a place where anything could be happening. The official story may be about signals intelligence, but the rumors reach far deeper into bunkers, into hidden projects, into possibilities we may never confirm. Even if the underground theories are pure imagination, Pine Gap still represents one of the most powerful and least understood intelligence facilities in the world. The fact that so much of its work is hidden from public view ensures it will remain a lightning rod for speculation. For Australians, it's a strange paradox. Their nation hosts one of the most important bases on Earth, but most citizens will never know exactly what goes on there. And that's what makes Pine Gap so much like its American cousin, Area 51, not because of flying saucers, but because secrecy itself breeds mystery. When you see those white domes glinting in the desert sun, you can't help but wonder what signals are they capturing right now. What conversations, what movements, what secrets from thousands of miles away are being funneled through this quiet patch of desert? In the end, Pine Gap is a reminder that some of the world's most guarded places don't need myths about hidden treasure or ancient relics to capture our imagination. Sometimes all it takes is silence, fences, and the knowledge that behind them the machinery of global power is humming away far out of reach. Our next stop isn't a mountain or a desert facility. It's an island so remote that most people couldn't place it on a map. In the middle of the Indian Ocean, far from shipping lanes or tourist routes, lies Diego Garcia, a tropical atoll that looks like paradise from above. Palm trees fringe turquoise lagoons, coral reefs circle its shores, and white sands stretch along the water. But this is no island resort. For the last half-century, Diego Garcia has been one of the most secretive and strategically important military bases in the world. Completely closed to outsiders and patrolled with a level of security that has kept rumors alive for decades. To understand why, you have to rewind to the 1960s. Back then, Diego Garcia was home to the Chagasians, an indigenous people who had lived on the island for generations, tending coconut plantations and building small villages. That all changed in 1966 when the United Kingdom struck a deal with the United States, leasing the island to the US military for 50 years, later extended the price, the complete removal of the island's residents. Over the course of several years, Chagassians were forcibly relocated to Mauritius and the Seychelles, often with little more than the clothes on their backs. Some were even tricked into leaving temporarily, only to find they weren't allowed to return. For the Chagassians, it was an uprooting that remains painful and controversial to this day. Once the island was cleared, construction began on a sprawling military facility. Diego Garcia became a joint UK-US base, but in practice, it is heavily dominated by American operations. Its location is its greatest strength. Sitting nearly equidistant between Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, Diego Garcia is a perfect hub for projecting military power across the region. Over the decades, the base has hosted bombers, surveillance planes, submarines, and an array of naval vessels. During the Gulf War, the Iraq War, and the Afghanistan conflict, it served as a key launch point for long-range strikes. To military planners, Diego Garcia is a floating fortress in the middle of the ocean. The island's security reflects its importance. Civilian access is strictly prohibited. No one gets in without clearance, and commercial travel to the island is impossible. The surrounding waters are patrolled, the airspace is restricted, and the base itself is lined with fences, cameras, and armed guards. Even journalists rarely gain entry, and when they do, their tours are heavily managed with only the most innocuous parts of the base shown. In effect, Diego Garcia is cut off from the rest of the world, a self-contained military hub sealed inside a tropical paradise. And of course, with isolation comes speculation. Over the years, allegations have surfaced that Diego Garcia has been used for purposes far beyond conventional military operations. One of the most persistent claims is that it hosted CIA black sites, secret prisons where suspected terrorists were detained and interrogated in the aftermath of 9/11. Human rights groups have long pressed the US and UK for answers. Both governments have denied the existence of permanent prisons on the island, though British officials later admitted the island had been used for rendition flights, meaning detainees were passed through en route to other secret locations. For many, those partial admissions only deepened suspicion that the base's true role has been understated. Former officials and watchdog groups have suggested that the secrecy around Diego Garcia is more than just about military operations. Some believe it hides evidence of extraordinary rendition, secret interrogations, or the storage of sensitive weapon systems. Others go further, suggesting that underground facilities exist on the island, hidden beneath its coral and sand, where activities never meant for public scrutiny are carried out. While concrete proof remains elusive, the very fact that no independent observers are allowed in makes it impossible to rule out. The island has even been swept into the strange orbit of aviation conspiracy theories. In 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished with 239 people on board, sparking one of the greatest aviation mysteries of modern times. Almost immediately, some theorists suggested the plane had been diverted to Diego Garcia, whether accidentally hijacked or even deliberately by military forces. While investigators found no evidence to support the claim, and the official search focused on the southern Indian Ocean, the theory persists in some circles. The isolation of Diego Garcia and its inaccessibility make it an irresistible candidate for speculation. After all, if you wanted to hide a missing aircraft, what better place than a base no outsider can visit? What makes Diego Garcia even more intriguing is its dual nature. On one hand, it's paradise. Lagoons teeming with fish, coconut palms swaying in the breeze, crystal waters stretching as far as the eye can see. On the other hand, it's one of the most fortified pieces of real estate on Earth. It's a place where soldiers jog along beaches no tourist will ever touch, where radar dishes rise above palm trees, and where the line between beauty and power blurs completely. There are personal stories, too, that add a human dimension. Accounts from US military personnel who have served there often describe the surreal contrast of living in paradise while cut off from the world. Some recall fishing in the lagoons or snorkeling, on days off only to return to shifts monitoring global conflicts. From behind radar screens, others describe the eerie quiet of the island at night, when the jungle seems to swallow the sound of the ocean, leaving only the low hum of generators. For outsiders, these fragments are the only glimpses into life on Diego Garcia, each one reinforcing the sense of a closed world hidden behind fences. Meanwhile, the Chagosians continue to fight for the right to return. Court cases in the UK have challenged the legality of their forced removal, with the issue reaching international courts and drawing condemnation from human rights organizations. Yet, the strategic importance of the base has so far outweighed justice for its former inhabitants. For them, Diego Garcia is not just a fortress, but a lost homeland. Their exile adds a tragic human cost to the island's mystery. Taken together, Diego Garcia embodies a kind of paradox. It is both visible and invisible, famous and unknown. Maps show it clearly, and governments acknowledge its existence, yet almost nothing about its daily operations or hidden roles ever reaches the public. It's a reminder that some of the most heavily guarded places on Earth aren't hidden underground or buried in mountains. They can sit in plain view, ringed by coral reefs, while their true stories remain untold. Leaving behind the sunlit beaches of Diego Garcia, our trail now leads us to the rolling countryside of Wiltshire, England. Nestled among quiet fields and villages, you might not notice anything unusual at first glance, just another stretch of the English landscape. But here lies one of the most secretive and controversial research facilities in the United Kingdom, Porton Down. For over a century, this site has been cloaked in secrecy, linked to chemical and biological warfare experiments, and occasionally pushed into the headlines by events that remind the public just how little is truly known about what goes on behind its gates. Portown's story begins in 1916 during the First World War. At the time, chemical weapons had just entered modern warfare. Mustard gas and chlorine gas were devastating soldiers on the front lines in France and Belgium. Britain, desperate to both defend against and develop chemical weapons of its own, established a testing ground in the Wiltshire countryside. What started as a wartime expedient quickly grew into a permanent research facility. From those early days, Portown became synonymous with the secret science of chemical and biological defense. Throughout the 20th century, the site expanded. Laboratories sprouted across the compound, and secure ranges allowed scientists to test new agents in controlled outdoor environments. Officially, the purpose was defensive, developing protective gear, antidotes, and detection systems. But inevitably, that research also involved creating and studying some of the deadliest substances known to humanity. Anthrax, plague bacteria, nerve agents like sarin and VX, all are believed to have been studied at Port and Down. Some reports claim that during the Cold War, entire herds of animals were exposed to these agents in open-air tests on nearby ranges, their fate carefully recorded. The secrecy surrounding these experiments has long made Port and Down controversial. Over the years, former employees and declassified files have revealed that human trials were also conducted, sometimes with questionable consent. From the 1940s through the 1980s, servicemen were recruited to volunteer for what they were told were trials of protective clothing or mild chemicals. Many later claimed they were never informed of the true risks, and some suffered lasting health problems. In one infamous case from 1953, an RAF engineer named Ronald Madison died after being exposed to sarin during a test. His death was ruled accidental at the time, but decades later an inquest concluded it had been unlawful killing. For many, that case symbolized the ethical shadows that have always hung over Port and Down. Animal testing has also been a major part of the facility's work. Dogs, monkeys, pigs, and other animals have reportedly been exposed to chemical or biological agents in controlled experiments. Officials argue such testing was essential to developing protective measures and saving lives. But for animal rights activists, it added another layer of secrecy and controversy to an already mysterious site. Even as the Cold War ended, Portenown's relevance didn't fade. In fact, in recent years, it has been thrust into the spotlight again. In 2018, when former Russian spy Sergei Skril and his daughter Yulia were poisoned with a nerve agent in Salisbury, just a few miles from Porton Down. It was scientists from the facility who identified the substance as Novash, a class of advanced nerve agents developed in the Soviet Union. For a time, Porton Town was at the center of an international incident, its laboratories confirming evidence that rippled across global politics. The event reminded the world that while Porton Down may be hidden behind barbed wire fences and rolling hills, its work still touches on some of the most pressing and dangerous issues of the modern era. Security at Porton Down is exactly what you'd expect for a site handling deadly pathogens and chemical weapons. The perimeter is lined with fences, cameras, and warning signs. Airspace overhead is restricted. Only those with the highest clearance can enter the most secure laboratories, which are designed with multiple containment levels to ensure nothing escapes. These are the kinds of labs where scientists wear full-body suits, enter through multiple airlocks, and work behind sealed glass barriers. The safety protocols themselves read like something out of a thriller, because here, mistakes are not an option. Of course, such high security naturally fuels speculation about what else might be happening. Inside, some believe Porton Down still develops offensive capabilities despite international treaties banning chemical and biological weapons. Others claim the site stores secret stockpiles of these agents kept as a deterrent or in case of emergency. The facility's sheer size, it sprawls across thousands of acres, means much of it remains out of public view, allowing imaginations to fill in the gaps. Is it simply a defensive research center, or does it hold something more sinister? Personal accounts from those who've worked there are rare, but they occasionally surface. Retired scientists sometimes speak of the strange duality of life at Porton Down. Days spent conducting highly classified experiments, followed by evenings in the nearby pubs of Salisbury, unable to discuss a word of their work with family or friends. Some describe the unease of handling substances so dangerous that a single drop could be fatal, all under the weight of knowing they could never tell the outside world what they had done. For local residents, Porton Down has long been a quiet but unsettling neighbor. Most accept its presence, but whispers of accidents, unexplained illnesses, and unusual animal deaths have circulated for decades. The mythology surrounding Porton Down has grown almost as large as the reality. Some conspiracy theories suggest it has experimented with mind control substances, or that it holds samples of diseases long thought extinct. Others speculate about secret underground bunkers where classified projects continue away from prying eyes. With so little official information released, separating fact from rumor is nearly impossible. But that very uncertainty is what makes Porton Down endure in the public imagination. Despite all the secrecy, Porton Down is not a relic of the past. It remains one of the UK's most important defence research facilities, now officially under the Defence Science and Technology Laboratory. Its focus today is said to include counter-terrorism, pandemic preparedness, and defense against chemical and biological threats. In an era of global health crises and new forms of warfare, its work is as relevant as ever. But the long shadow of its history, human experiments, animal testing, secret trials means that the question of what really happens there will likely never be fully answered. Unlike Porton Down, where secrecy is enforced by governments, the next place guards itself in a way that no human army could match. Imagine descending a mile beneath the surface of the earth, through a labyrinth of mine shafts, only to step into a chamber that looks like the set of a science fiction film. Towering beams of translucent crystal jut from the floor and walls, some as long as a city bus and thicker than a tree trunk. Light scatters through their surfaces, creating an otherworldly glow that makes it hard to believe you're still on Earth at all. This is the Cave of the Crystals, hidden beneath the Naked Mine in Chihuahua, Mexico. A natural wonder so strange and inhospitable that it may be the most alien landscape our planet has ever produced. The cave was discovered almost by accident in the year 2000. Miners digging for silver and lead broke through a wall and suddenly found themselves staring into a chamber unlike anything seen before. What they had stumbled upon was a geological time capsule, a place where mineral-rich water, intense heat, and the slow passage of hundreds of thousands of years had created crystals of selenite on a scale no one thought possible. These weren't the small quartz points you might buy in a souvenir shop. These crystals reached up to 30 feet in length and weighed as much as 55 tons. Their sheer size defied expectation. Some scientists compared them to living architecture, as if nature itself had constructed a cathedral out of glass. But beauty alone doesn't make the Cave of the Crystals remarkable. What makes it truly forbidding is the environment inside. Temperatures hover around 58 degrees C, 136 degrees F, with humidity close to 100%. For perspective, that's hot enough to cook food and moist enough to prevent sweat from evaporating, which means the body has no way to cool itself. Within minutes, heat stroke sets in. Without protection, most people would collapse in less than 10 minutes. Even with special cooling suits and respirators, scientists who studied the cave could only endure short visits, usually no longer than half an hour. It's as though the cave itself is actively rejecting human presence. Because of these conditions, access to the cave has always been tightly restricted. Only a handful of scientific teams have ever entered, and even they had to follow strict protocols. Entry required government and corporate approval, full safety gear, and monitoring by specialists on the surface. Tourists were never allowed. It simply would have been a death sentence. Eventually, as the mine's pumps that kept water at bay were turned off, the chamber refilled, sealing the crystals back in their natural environment and making access nearly impossible. Today, the cave is effectively closed again, hidden beneath layers of rock and water, protected not by guards, but by the extreme conditions of nature. The discovery sparked a flood of theories and myths. Photographs of researchers dwarfed by colossal crystals quickly circulated online, and people couldn't help but compare the cave to science fiction imagery. It looked like a set from Alien or Superman's Fortress of Solitude, a place too strange to belong to Earth. Some UFO enthusiasts speculated that the cave might have been used by extraterrestrials in the distant past, its massive crystals serving as energy conduits or storage devices. Others wondered if the formations contained information like natural hard drives encoding the history of the planet in crystalline form. None of this has scientific backing, of course, but the sheer alien quality of the cave made it fertile ground for imagination. Scientists, meanwhile, focused on the geological marvel of how such crystals could form. The secret lay in the water that once filled the chamber. For hundreds of thousands of years, hot groundwater saturated with calcium sulfate slowly cooled inside the cavity. The result was the growth of selenite crystals inch by inch until they reached sizes unmatched anywhere else on the planet. It was a process so delicate that even a small change in temperature or chemistry could have altered the outcome. In a sense, the Cave of the Crystals represents geological luck on a cosmic scale. A perfect set of conditions maintained for eons, never disturbed until miners happened upon it. There are eerie human stories connected to the discovery as well. Early accounts suggest some of the first miners who entered without understanding the danger quickly succumbed to the heat and collapsed, needing to be dragged out by their colleagues. Even seasoned researchers describe the experience as overwhelming. One scientist likened it to walking into an oven while being slowly suffocated. An environment so hostile that survival instincts screamed at you to leave, even as your eyes were captivated by the otherworldly beauty surrounding you. Another admitted that after just 20 minutes, his vision began to blur, and his heart pounded as though he had run a marathon. These accounts lend the cave an almost cursed reputation, nature's hidden treasure chest that punishes anyone who dares to look inside for too long. The cave also ignited debates about preservation. Once exposed, the crystals began to deteriorate slightly from human contact, lights, and changes in humidity. Scientists warned that even short visits risked contaminating or damaging the fragile formations. This is part of why the decision was eventually made to let the mine flood again, effectively closing the cave off from human exploration. For some, it was frustrating to lose access to such a unique place. For others, it was the only way to ensure the crystals would survive in their natural state for future generations. Even if no one ever sees them again, as with many guarded places, the Cave of the Crystals inspires speculation about what else may lie hidden. If one chamber like this could exist, are there others still sealed beneath the earth? Could there be larger caves with crystals even more massive waiting in untouched pockets deep below? Some geologists believe it's possible. After all, the Nika mine itself has revealed several other crystal chambers, though none on the same scale. The Earth is vast and much of it remains unexplored. The discovery of the Cave of the Crystals may be just the beginning of what lies hidden under our feet. Personal fascination with the cave has even led some researchers to link it to questions about life itself. In 2017, scientists announced they had found microbial life inside fluid pockets trapped within the crystals, organisms that may have lain dormant for tens of thousands of years. Revived in laboratories, these microbes hinted at the possibility that life can survive in extreme conditions, locked away inside minerals until the right environment releases them. For astrobiologists, this raised tantalizing parallels. If life can persist in a crystal in Mexico, could it not also persist in frozen oceans on Europa or beneath the crust of Mars? Suddenly, the Cave of the Crystals wasn't just a geological wonder. It was a laboratory of survival, hinting at possibilities beyond Earth. And yet, despite its scientific significance, the cave remains closed. No tours, no public viewing, no casual exploration. The few photographs that exist are enough to awe anyone who sees them, but they're also a reminder of how inaccessible the place is. In an age where the world feels thoroughly mapped and digitized, the Cave of the Crystals is proof that there are still places humans simply cannot go. It is a treasure guarded not by governments or fences, but by the Earth itself, as if nature decided this marvel was not meant to be freely shared. So we're left with a paradox. One of the most extraordinary landscapes ever discovered lies sealed beneath the desert, deadly to enter and impossible to experience firsthand. For scientists, it remains an unmatched case study. For dreamers, it is proof that our planet still holds wonders that look like they belong to another world. And for everyone else, it raises the question, if Earth can produce something this alien just beneath our feet, what else might be hiding down there waiting to be found? Leaving behind a cavern of crystals that guards itself with heat and humidity, we now turn to a very different kind of subterranean world, one where the air is cool, the lights are fluorescent, and the silence is broken not by dripping water, but by the steady hum of servers and climate systems. Buried beneath the hills of Pennsylvania lies Iron Mountain, a former limestone mine that has been transformed into one of the most secure storage facilities on Earth. If the Cave of the Crystals was nature's vault, Iron Mountain is humanity's, holding within its depths the memory of the modern world. The story of Iron Mountain begins in the early 20th century, when miners carved out a vast network of tunnels and chambers beneath Boyers, Pennsylvania. For decades, the mine produced limestone. But as the resource was exhausted, the underground labyrinth was abandoned. Its size alone was staggering. Hundreds of acres of excavated space, all hidden beneath 220 ft of solid rock. While other mines across America closed and collapsed, Iron Mountain caught the attention of someone with a very different vision. What if, instead of extracting resources, the mine could serve as a vault, protecting the most precious resource of all, information. By the 1950s, the Cold War was in full swing, and fears of nuclear war made the idea of underground storage especially appealing. The mine's natural conditions, constant cool temperatures, low humidity, and stable geology were ideal for preserving sensitive documents, films, and records. Add to that the protection of solid rock overhead, and Iron Mountain was reborn as a fortress for data before the digital age even fully began. Over time, it became the go-to destination for governments, corporations, and cultural institutions looking for a place to lock away their most irreplaceable archives. Today, Iron Mountain houses some of the most important and secretive collections in the world. Governments store classified records here, far from the threat of attack or disaster. Major corporations use it to secure everything from financial documents to intellectual property. Cultural treasures are preserved as well. Original film reels, historical photographs, master audio recordings. In fact, it's said that the master recordings of some of the world's most famous musicians rest deep inside Iron Mountain, their legacies protected in temperature-controlled vaults. Even Bill Gates has stored part of his vast digital archive here, safeguarding a collection of historical data he has called the Digital Alexandria. What makes Iron Mountain especially fascinating is not just what's inside, but how carefully it's protected. Visitors don't simply stroll in. The facility uses multiple layers of security: biometric scanners, armed guards, surveillance cameras, and strict access protocols. Climate control systems keep the underground environment at a steady temperature and humidity, ensuring that paper, film, and magnetic tapes remain stable for decades. In many ways, the facility is like a modern-day time capsule designed to keep the record of human activity safe against both natural decay and catastrophic events. The scale of the operation is hard to grasp without seeing it. Reports suggest the mine stretches for miles underground with more than 1.8 million square ft of storage space. Vast corridors lead to sealed vaults, each customized for its tenant. Some vaults look like simple warehouses filled with boxes of documents. Others resemble high-tech data centers lined with servers that hum quietly as they back up critical digital information. The mix of old and new is striking. Ancient manuscripts sitting just down the hall from terabytes of cloud storage. Of course, the secrecy of Iron Mountain has inspired speculation about what else might be hidden there. If governments trust it with classified files, could it also hold evidence of sensitive programs, technologies, or even suppressed knowledge? The idea of a subterranean vault filled not only with history, but with secrets has made Iron Mountain a favorite topic in conspiracy circles. Some have suggested it might house evidence of UFO encounters or alternative records of world events. Others point out that its very business model relies on discretion, which means the true extent of its contents may never be revealed. First-hand accounts from people who visited the facility offer tantalizing glimpses. One journalist who toured the site described descending through secure checkpoints into an underground city with its own roads, lighting, and even cafeterias for workers. Trucks rumble down wide tunnels delivering new archives or equipment. Some employees admit the atmosphere can feel surreal, spending your day surrounded by the physical memory of the modern world, knowing that most of it will never see the light of day again. A few even joked that it feels like working inside a secret bunker in a James Bond movie. There are famous examples of what we know is stored there. The original film reels of classics like Gone with the Wind and The Wizard of Oz are said to be preserved within Iron Mountain. Photographs from the archives of major newspapers, including decades of unpublished negatives, lie locked in its vaults. Master recordings from artists ranging from Elvis Presley to Michael Jackson are believed to be housed there, protected against fire, decay, and theft. When you think about it, Iron Mountain isn't just a vault. It's a cultural memory bank preserving the raw material of history itself. And yet, there's something unsettling about the idea too. If so much of our collective memory is hidden underground, who decides what gets stored and what gets forgotten? Could critical records be sealed away indefinitely, never accessible to the public? If information is power, then Iron Mountain is one of the most powerful places on Earth, holding not just data, but the authority to control who sees it. That thought alone keeps the mystery alive. The facility's design also fuels the imagination. With its endless tunnels and secure chambers, it's easy to picture Iron Mountain as a setting for any number of scenarios. A safe haven for elites in a global crisis, a digital ark preserving civilization's knowledge, or a vault holding secrets too dangerous to release. And in a way, each of those possibilities might contain a grain of truth. Its official purpose is storage, but the sheer scale and secrecy invite speculation about roles far beyond what's publicly acknowledged. Even without speculation, the reality is impressive enough. Few places on Earth bring together such a wide spectrum of history. From ancient records to modern data, from cultural milestones to corporate contracts. It's a place where the handwritten letters of world leaders might sit just a hallway away from backup servers running cloud infrastructure. Iron Mountain is both archive and fortress, museum and vault. It's worth noting too that this isn't the only Iron Mountain facility in existence. The company operates secure storage centers around the world, but the Pennsylvania site is the crown jewel, the one that combines scale, history and reputation. Its unique location in a former mine gives it an advantage no modern warehouse could match. Hundreds of feet of solid limestone shielding it from disaster. In a world increasingly worried about cyber attacks, climate change and global instability, that kind of security is priceless, and so Iron Mountain endures as one of the world's most unusual guarded places. It doesn't house weapons or secret experiments, but something equally powerful. The collective memory of humanity. Every box, every reel, every server represents a piece of our story. Frozen in time, waiting for a future where it might be needed again. After leaving the steel doors of Iron Mountain behind, our journey takes us across the Baltic Sea to the rocky islands south of Stockholm. To a visitor, the Musko archipelago south of Stockholm looks like any other stretch of Sweden's rugged coastline. Pine forests, rocky outcrops, quiet fishing cottages, and sailboats drifting across narrow channels. But beneath one of these islands lies something entirely different. Carved into the granite is one of the largest underground military facilities ever built in Europe, the Musko Naval Base. It is a fortress designed to hide entire warships, shield a fleet from nuclear attack, and operate in complete secrecy right under the noses of tourists who never realize what's below. The idea of Musko came out of the tense years after World War II. Sweden had managed to stay neutral during the conflict, but the Cold War presented a new dilemma. With NATO to the west and the Soviet Union just across the Baltic Sea, Sweden was in the middle of a potential battleground. Submarines prowled the Baltic. Long-range bombers tested air defenses, and both superpowers eyed Scandinavia as a strategic flank. Although Sweden never formally joined NATO, it poured enormous resources into defense. The Swedish Navy faced a simple problem. If its ships were kept in open harbors, they would be vulnerable to missiles or nuclear strikes in the opening minutes of a war. The solution was bold: carve an entire naval base out of solid granite, a place where warships could vanish underground and emerge only when needed. Construction began in the 1950s and continued for nearly 20 years. It was one of the largest excavation projects in Swedish history. More than 1.5 million tons of granite were blasted and hauled out of the island. Workers labored in shifts around the clock, often in secrecy, bound by agreements not to discuss what they were building. When Musko officially opened in 1969, the result was staggering. Inside the mountain stretched more than 12 mi of tunnels. The centerpiece was 3 enormous dry docks, each large enough to conceal destroyers and submarines. Warships could sail directly into hidden entrances, disappear behind armored doors, and be serviced in complete secrecy. Invisible to satellites or reconnaissance aircraft, everything was designed to withstand catastrophe. Hundreds of meters of rock provided natural shielding against conventional and nuclear attacks. Gigantic blast doors sealed off entire sections. The base had its own power plants, freshwater supply, food storage, and hospital facilities, allowing it to operate independently for months. Barracks were built for thousands of sailors and officers, and the entire facility was laid out like a small underground city. Trucks and machinery moved through a main tunnel nearly 3 kilometers long, wide enough to drive military convoys directly into the mountain. At its peak, Musko was the heart of Sweden's Baltic defense. Though neutral, Sweden faced constant tension with the Soviet Union. The Baltic fleet stationed in Leningrad, now St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad, was one of the USSR's most powerful naval forces. In any conflict, Swedish waters would become a front line. Musko allowed Sweden's navy to disappear underground. From there, it could monitor submarine movements, repair vessels, and coordinate defense and safety. Sweden invested heavily in submarines and fast attack craft designed for the narrow Baltic waters, and Musko became their hidden anchor. The 1980s brought some of the most dramatic episodes. In 1981, a Soviet Whiskey-class submarine famously ran ground near the Swedish naval base at Karlskrona, sparking an international incident. Throughout the decade, Sweden reported repeated intrusions of suspected Soviet subs into its waters, sometimes chased with depth charges. Many of these hunts are believed to have been directed from Moscow, though the details remain classified. Secrecy was absolute. For decades, the Swedish public was told little or nothing about the base. The approaches were fenced and guarded. Photography was forbidden, and workers kept silent. Even many sailors stationed there had no idea how vast the facility was. To most Swedes, Musko was simply another island in the archipelago, its true purpose hidden beneath the rock. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, it seemed Moscow's mission had ended. With the threat gone, Sweden reduced its defense spending, mothballed parts of the base, and scaled down operations. For years, it was spoken of as a Cold War relic, impressive but obsolete in a new era of peace. But the fortress never really closed. The infrastructure remained, maintained in reserve, its tunnels and docks kept ready, just in case. And by the 2000s, the world had shifted again. Russia modernized its navy. Tensions in the Baltic rose, and NATO once more increased its presence in Scandinavia. Suddenly, Musko's advantages in visibility, resilience, and scale were valuable again. In 2019, Sweden formally reactivated Musko, relocating much of its naval high command back into the mountain. Today, modern Visbas stealth corvettes and advanced submarines are serviced in its hidden docks. The base once more hums with activity, though outsiders see little. Access is tightly controlled, and even satellite photos reveal only small hints of what goes on inside. Those who have been inside describe Musko as surreal. Endless corridors echoing with footsteps, fluorescent lit tunnels stretching for miles, and cavernous docks where entire warships float beneath stone ceilings. The air is cool and dry, carrying the smell of machinery and oil. For sailors, it could feel both safe and claustrophobic. Exercises sometimes involved sealing the massive blast doors, isolating the base completely from the outside world. Knowing you were locked inside a mountain designed to withstand nuclear war was both reassuring and unnerving. Engineers still marvel at the achievement. Excavating so much granite with 1950s technology was staggering. Preventing collapse required lining walls with concrete and reinforcing ceilings with steel. Ventilation shafts had to be drilled hundreds of meters to provide air, and entire subterranean systems were created to manage water and power. Even by modern standards, Musko is a feat of engineering. As with any guarded place, speculation surrounds Musko. Some claim sections of the base remain sealed and unused, containing hidden tunnels or forgotten chambers. Others wonder if it connects to Sweden's wider underground defense network, which includes civilian bunkers and even hidden air bases carved into mountains. Sweden invested heavily in underground protection during the Cold War. so the idea isn't far-fetched. Officially, Moscow has no nuclear weapons and functions purely as a naval base, but secrecy invites questions. Were there experiments with new technology inside? Is the base larger than the public has been told? The truth sealed behind granite and steel may never be fully known. Perhaps the most remarkable feature of Moscow is how ordinary the island looks from above. Tourists sail past its pine forests and cottages without realizing that behind hidden doors lies one of Europe's most fortified complexes. Even the entrances are disguised and the naval docks open directly into the sea, invisible to anyone not looking for them. This camouflages Moscow's greatest strength, blending into the landscape until the moment it's needed. From the surface, it's an island like any other beneath. It's a fortress designed to endure the apocalypse. More than 50 years after it opened, Moscow Naval base is still active, still guarded, and still hidden. In an age of satellites, drones, and precision missiles, the ability to hide entire warships underground remains a rare and powerful asset. Sweden's decision to return its naval command here shows that what was once built for the Cold War still matters in the 21st century. Our trail now takes us into the rolling green hills of Yorkshire, England. Here, tucked into the countryside, lies a site that seems almost playful at first glance. Dozens of enormous white spheres scattered across the fields, looking for all the world like a collection of giant golf balls. But these aren't part of a strange sporting complex. They're redundant, protective shells covering powerful satellite dishes, and beneath their almost whimsical appearance lies one of the most significant and secretive intelligence facilities in the Western world, RAF Menwith Hill. Menwith Hill has been a fixture of Cold War and post-Cold War intrigue since its establishment in the 1950s. Officially, it is a Royal Air Force station, but in practice, it functions as a joint US-UK operation staffed heavily by American personnel. Its initial purpose was modest, intercepting Soviet radio communications, but over time, its role expanded dramatically. By the 1970s, it was central to the Echelon surveillance network, a global system designed to monitor communications traffic from satellites and ground-based transmissions. What began as a listening post for the Cold War became the ears of the modern world. The scale of the base is remarkable. Spread across more than 500 acres, the compound bristles with security fencing, floodlights, and cameras. Access is tightly controlled, and the airspace above is restricted. Inside, under the cover of those famous reduns, vast satellite dishes swivel silently, tracking signals across the globe. Fiber optic cables snake into underground hubs, linking Menwith Hill to other listening posts worldwide. It's a place designed to hear what others would rather keep private. And that brings us to the controversies that have dogged Menwith Hill for decades. By the 1990s, privacy advocates were warning that Echelon and Menwith Hill in particular was being used to monitor not just enemy states, but friendly nations, businesses, and even ordinary citizens. Reports suggested the system could vacuum up international phone calls, emails, faxes, and digital data using keyword searches and voice recognition to flag items of interest. Officially, the base's mission has always been framed as defensive, protecting against terrorism, espionage, and missile threats. But critics argue that it represents a staggering reach of surveillance power, one that blurs the line between national security and global eavesdropping. For locals in Yorkshire, the base has always been a curiosity, and at times a source of unease. Those white domes dominate the landscape. Visible for miles around, their strange spherical forms, both futuristic and oddly out of place in the pastoral English countryside. Some residents joke about living next to the world's biggest golf course. Others worry about the secrecy and the sense of being watched. Over the years, protest groups have camped outside the gates, demanding greater transparency and questioning whether Britain has surrendered too much control to its American partners. Inside the intelligence community, however, Menwith Hill has been seen as indispensable. During the Cold War, It intercepted Soviet missile telemetry and communications, providing vital insights into Moscow's capabilities. After September 11th, it reportedly played a role in guiding drone strikes and tracking terrorist networks. Today, it is said to support missile defense systems, scanning the skies for potential threats. Whether listening for a radio call in Siberia or tracking a phone signal in the Middle East, the base's reach stretches far beyond the Yorkshire Dales. Of course, secrecy breeds speculation. Some allege that Menwith Hill can tap directly into undersea cables and internet backbones, making it not just a satellite interception station, but a node in the global surveillance web. Whistleblowers have suggested its analysts sift through mountains of data daily, much of it belonging to people who are neither terrorists nor criminals. To critics, this makes Menwith Hill less a shield and more an omnipresent ear, listening to conversations no one ever consented to share. Personal glimpses from those who have worked there are rare, but they occasionally surface. Former employees describe cavernous operations rooms filled with banks of screens, teams of analysts monitoring streams of data from around the globe. Others recall the eerie quiet of the reduns themselves, stepping inside one of the giant white spheres to find a massive dish pointed toward the heavens, rotating with slow, deliberate precision. It's a world far removed from the farms and villages just beyond the fence, a reminder of how much can be hidden in plain sight. Menwith Hill has also been a magnet for protest and activism. In the 1980s, during the height of nuclear tensions, peace camps sprang up nearby with demonstrators arguing. The base made Britain a target in any potential conflict. More recently, privacy groups have renewed their criticism, especially as revelations about mass surveillance programs have entered public debate. To them, Menwith Hill embodies the tension between security and liberty, a facility that promises protection, but at the cost of unprecedented intrusion. And then there's the enduring mystery. Despite the protests, despite the scrutiny, very little concrete information about Menwith Hill's inner workings has ever been confirmed. The base remains under tight wraps, its activities shielded by layers of classification. When officials do comment, they describe it in the vaguest terms, supporting intelligence operations, assisting with defense. But when a place has the ability to listen to the entire world, the question becomes, who is really being protected and who is really being watched? So while the domes of Menwith Hill may look whimsical against the Yorkshire sky, they are anything but playful. They are the outward face of one of the most powerful surveillance systems ever built. A reminder that in the modern age, power isn't just measured in bombs or tanks, but in the ability to hear everything. And the unsettling question that lingers is this: when a place can listen to the entire planet, who's really watching whom? Leaving behind the white domes of Menwith Hill, which seem to listen in on the world, our journey now carries us out into the Atlantic Ocean, where an island appeared almost overnight, born from fire and ash. It was November 1963 when fishermen off the coast of Iceland spotted smoke rising from the sea. At first, they thought a ship was on fire. But as they approached, it became clear this was no accident. A volcanic eruption was tearing through the ocean floor, and within days a new island broke the surface. They named it Tserti after Kurta, a fire giant from Norse mythology. From its violent birth, Tserti became something extraordinary, a natural laboratory where scientists could watch life take hold from scratch. Unlike older islands where human history blurs the picture, Tserti started clean. No people, no animals, no plants, just raw volcanic rock jutting out of the Atlantic. For researchers, this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to see how ecosystems develop step by step in a world untouched by human interference. But to keep the experiment pure, strict rules were imposed. From the very beginning, Tserti was declared off-limits to the public. No tourists, no settlers, no one wandering ashore with boots caked in foreign soil. Even scientists who land on Cherti must follow meticulous protocols. They can only visit with approval, and they aren't allowed to bring seeds, soil, or even food scraps that could alter the island's trajectory. If a researcher accidentally leaves behind something as small as an apple core, it's considered contamination. One early incident where a tomato plant sprouted from a discarded sandwich quickly reminded everyone how fragile the experiment was. It was removed immediately. That level of restriction makes Cherti one of the most forbidden places on Earth. It isn't guarded by soldiers or fences, but by the determination to let nature write its own script. And what scientists have observed over the last 60 years is nothing short of fascinating. The first arrivals were microbes carried in by the wind and sea. Then came mosses and lichens slowly greening the black rock. Seeds floated in on ocean currents or were dropped by seabirds. By the 1970s, grasses began to spread, followed by flowering plants. Seabirds themselves became central to the island's growth. Their nests brought nutrients. Their droppings fertilized the soil, and their movements carried seeds from elsewhere. Over time, insects appeared, followed by spiders and other small creatures, each wave building on the last. What makes CSI so compelling is that scientists have been able to track this progression in real time. Normally, when we look at landscapes, we're seeing the end result of millions of years of change. On Cherti, the timeline is compressed into decades. Every new plant, every insect, every bird species that arrives tells a story about how life colonizes a blank slate. For biologists, it's like watching a slow-motion film of evolution in action. And yet, for all its scientific importance, the island holds a strange, almost mythic allure. Locals call it the Forbidden Island, a reminder of Earth's raw power and fragility. From a distance, you can see its black cliffs rising from the ocean, often wreathed in mist, but you cannot step foot on it. The very fact that it's so close, visible from Iceland's shores, yet so completely off-limits, adds to its mystique. Fishermen pass it on their routes. Tourists gaze at it from boats or planes, but few will ever set foot there. There are stories from those rare few who have landed, and they often describe the experience in reverent tones. One scientist recalled stepping onto the barren rock in the 1960s and feeling as though he were on another planet, surrounded by steam vents and jagged lava. Another described the eerie silence broken only by seabird cries and the sense that every footstep carried enormous responsibility. To walk on Cherti is to be both an intruder and a witness to something bigger than yourself. Of course, mysteries linger. Some wonder how long Cherti will last. Volcanic islands are often temporary, eroded by the relentless waves of the Atlantic. Parts of CSI have already been worn away, its original surface area shrinking over time. Scientists predict that within a few centuries, it may vanish beneath the sea entirely. In that sense, the island is as fragile as it is forbidden, guarded not only by rules, but by the ticking clock of erosion. Others speculate about what might be hidden beneath its surface. Volcanic islands are windows into Earth's fiery depths, and CSI is no exception. Beneath its black crust lies a record of the eruption that created it, frozen in layers of lava and ash. Drilling projects have retrieved cores from deep within the island, offering clues about the conditions that shaped it. Some see these cores as more than geological samples. They are time capsules of creation locked in stone. The restrictions around Cherti also raise intriguing what-if questions. What if the island had not been protected? Would humans have rushed to colonize it, building outposts or tourist ventures? Would its fragile ecosystem have been overwhelmed before it ever had the chance to develop naturally? In a way, Cherti represents a fork in the road, an island deliberately left alone so that we can glimpse what the world might look like without us. There are personal anecdotes that capture just how unusual the island's restrictions are. In one case, a group of scientists found a few boys from a nearby fishing boat had secretly landed on Cherti out of curiosity. Their presence sparked alarm, not because they caused visible harm, but because even a handful of human footsteps could introduce seeds, insects, or bacteria that might alter the island's trajectory forever. The boys were quickly escorted off, and the incident became a cautionary tale of how fragile the rules must be. Another story involves a research team carefully sterilizing their equipment before landing, scrubbing boots and clothing to ensure nothing foreign would cling to them. The level of precaution borders on ritual, highlighting how seriously the guardians of Tserti take their charge. Despite these rules, Tserti continues to evolve on its own terms. Today, the island supports dozens of plant species, nesting colonies of seabirds, and thriving insect populations. What began as barren rock has become a miniature ecosystem alive with color and sound. And yet, it remains closed off, a forbidden garden watched from afar. The irony is that the very restrictions that make it so mysterious are also what preserve its wonder. For Icelanders, Tserti has become more than a scientific site. It is a symbol of the island nation's intimate relationship with fire and ice, creation and destruction. Living in a land shaped by volcanoes, they see Tserti as both a reminder of their vulnerability and a testament to Earth's creative force. It's not unusual to hear locals speak of it in almost spiritual terms, as if the island carries a destiny beyond human understanding. And so Tserti stands apart from other most guarded places. It isn't sealed with fences or patrolled by guards. Its barriers are invisible: rules, science, and time itself. Its mystery doesn't come from secrets locked away underground, but from the very act of leaving it untouched, watching from the outside as nature unfolds in slow, deliberate steps. After the raw, untamed island of Tserti, our journey veers back into the heart of America. This time to a place where secrecy was hidden, not in the wilderness, but beneath chandeliers, golf courses, and fine dining. Picture a sprawling luxury resort tucked into the rolling hills of West Virginia, famous for hosting presidents, celebrities, and captains of industry. Guests came for the hot springs, the glamorous ballrooms, and the gentle charm of Southern hospitality. What almost none of them knew was that just below their feet, behind innocuous doors and down concrete-lined corridors, lay one of the United States' best-kept Cold War secrets, a massive bunker designed to shelter the entire US Congress in the event of nuclear war. This was the Greenbrier Bunker, sometimes called Project Greek Island, hidden in plain sight beneath one of the most luxurious hotels in the country. The story begins in the late 1950s and early 1960s, when the Cold War was heating up and nuclear anxieties were peaking. The US government faced a chilling problem. If Washington, D.C. was obliterated in a nuclear strike, how could the country continue to function? Continuity of government plans were drawn up, and one of the boldest solutions was to construct a secret underground relocation site for Congress. The location needed to be remote enough to survive an attack, but still accessible from the capital within hours. The Greenbrier Resort, already a popular retreat for Washington's elite, was chosen. And so, with little fanfare, construction began in 1958. On the surface, the resort added a new wing. The West Virginia wing advertised as an expansion to accommodate more guests. Beneath it, however, workers carved out a colossal underground facility, 112,000 square ft of reinforced chambers, sealed behind blast doors several feet thick. It was a two-story fortress hidden beneath the trappings of luxury, a place where lawmakers could retreat while the world above burned. The bunker's design was both practical and eerie. It contained dormitory-style sleeping quarters for hundreds of legislators, a cafeteria, meeting rooms, offices, and even a television studio where members of Congress could broadcast reassuring messages to the nation. There were stockpiles of food, barrels of water, and a power plant capable of sustaining the complex for months. The air filtration system was designed to keep out radioactive fallout, and decontamination chambers stood ready for anyone entering after exposure. In short, it was a small underground city built not for comfort, but for survival and governance. Yet what made the Greenbrier bunker especially fascinating was the secrecy that cloaked it. Very few people knew it existed. Even many resort staff had no idea what was hidden beneath their workplace. The facility was maintained by a front company, Foresight Associates, which posed as a television repair and electronics business. In reality, its employees were government personnel tasked with keeping the bunker in working order. For decades, they moved quietly through the resort, blending in with the hotel's operations while secretly maintaining one of the country's most important survival plans. Guests at the Greenbrier walked through hallways that concealed steel doors, never realizing what lay beyond. Behind one particularly ordinary-looking door disguised as part of a conference room wall was the entrance to the bunker itself. To those in the know, it was the gateway to America's hidden lifeboat. To everyone else, it was just another wall. The scale of the deception is almost hard to believe. An entire nuclear survival facility operating in plain sight beneath a luxury hotel undetected for more than 3 decades. The secret might have lasted even longer, if not for a 1992 expose by the Washington Post. Reporter Ted Gupp revealed the existence of the bunker to the public, describing its purpose and layout in detail. Overnight, one of America's most closely guarded Cold War secrets was laid bare. The government quickly decommissioned the facility, declaring it no longer viable now that its cover was blown. For locals and frequent guests of the Greenbrier, the revelation was both shocking and oddly fitting, proof that the quiet hills of West Virginia had been hiding one of the great mysteries of the Cold War. Since its decommissioning, parts of the bunker have been open to the public as a tourist attraction. Visitors can now walk through some of the same reinforced halls, see the blast doors, and glimpse the Spartan dormitories where members of Congress would have lived. Guides recount the history with a mix of pride and curiosity, pointing out details that once would have been classified. Yet not all of the bunker is accessible. Some areas remain sealed off, either for safety reasons or, as some speculate, because they may still serve a hidden purpose. That lingering ambiguity fuels the idea that the Greenbrier bunker isn't just a relic of the past. It may still be quietly maintained, upgraded in secret to serve as a fallback option if disaster ever strikes again. Personal accounts from those connected to the project add color to the story. Some former staff recall the oddity of working in such a strange double life, repairing TV equipment upstairs while downstairs maintaining a nuclear bunker. Lawmakers who later visited the decommissioned site admitted they were astonished that it had been kept secret from them for so long. And locals in White Sulphur Springs, the town that hosts the resort, still tell stories about the day the news broke, remembering the disbelief that such a colossal facility had been hidden in their backyard. The Greenbrier bunker has also seeped into American cultural lore. It has been featured in documentaries, referenced in novels, and even inspired television plot lines about continuity of government plans. Its very existence sparks speculation about how many other hidden facilities might still operate in secrecy across the country. If Congress had a luxury lifeboat beneath a resort, what else might be buried beneath the mountains, deserts, and plains of America? And there's the heart of the mystery. Was the Greenbrier bunker truly abandoned? Or has it quietly evolved into something new? While the tourists focus on its history, some believe parts of the facility remain operational, upgraded with modern technology and held in reserve for emergencies. After all, the need for continuity of government hasn't disappeared, and the US has a long tradition of building backup command centers. Could it be that beneath the polished halls of the Greenbrier Resort, the blast doors still guard a living, breathing Cold War legacy, ready to be used at a moment's notice? It's an unsettling thought. Lawmakers enjoying a retreat in luxury, while below their feet lies a shadow government's refuge, waiting for the day the unthinkable happen. From the hidden blast doors of the Greenbrier, our journey shifts to somewhere very different. As beneath the rolling hills and sleepy villages of eastern France lies one of the most ambitious military projects ever attempted, the Maginot Line. At first glance, the countryside looks ordinary. Farmland, forests and small stone towns. But hidden underfoot is a labyrinth of tunnels, galleries and fortified chambers stretching for hundreds of miles. Built in the shadow of one world war and destined to be tested in another, the Maginot Line was a fortress unlike anything that came before it. Even today, decades after its abandonment, large stretches remain sealed, unexplored, and cloaked in mystery. The origins of this subterranean fortress trace back to 1918. World War I had devastated France, leaving millions dead and much of its northeast in ruins. German armies had stormed across the border in 1914 and again in 1918, and the French government was determined never to allow such an invasion again. The memory of the trenches, of artillery barges leveling towns, and of poison gas drifting across battlefields was seared into the minds of French planners. So when the dust settled, they resolved to create a defense so formidable that no army could break through. The idea was not entirely new. For centuries, France had built fortresses along its borders, most famously the star-shaped citadels designed by Sébastien le Rest d'Avabon in the 17th century. But by the 20th century, those walls were obsolete. Airplanes and long-range artillery could reduce them to rubble in days. The new generation of French engineers concluded that the only way to protect their forces was to hide them underground, beneath layers of reinforced concrete and earth. Planning for the Maginot Line began in the 1920s, and in 1929 construction formally commenced. It was named after André Maginot, France's Minister of War, who had fought and been wounded in World War I and became a passionate advocate for strong defenses. Over the next decade, tens of thousands of workers blasted, tunneled, and poured concrete across France's eastern frontier. By the late 1930s, an enormous underground system stretched from Switzerland in the south to Luxembourg in the north, covering France's most vulnerable border with Germany. The Maginot Line was not a single wall, but a series of heavily fortified complexes known as connected by underground galleries. Within these complexes lay barracks, ammunition stores, command posts, and artillery positions, all linked by tunnels wide enough to carry small electric trains. Soldiers could move safely underground from one part of a fort to another, even under bombardment. Above ground, reinforced gun turrets and observation posts protruded like steel mushrooms, able to retract into the earth when threatened. Life inside was surprisingly modern for the 1930s. Each fort was essentially a self-contained city. There were dormitories with bunk beds, kitchens equipped with coal and electric stoves, medical clinics, chapels, even cinemas in some larger generators supplied electricity, pumps provided fresh water, and massive ventilators filtered the air to protect against gas attacks. The tunnels maintained a steady temperature, cool in summer and warm in winter, and soldiers often joked that conditions underground were more comfortable than in regular army barracks. The garrisons ate hot meals, watched films, and drilled in the tunnels while waiting for an attack that might never come. In terms of engineering, the line was formidable. Walls and ceilings were meters thick, designed to resist heavy artillery. Ammunition was stored deep underground and carried to the gun turrets by rail. Some of as many as 200 men stationed inside, supported by vast stockpiles of food and fuel that could last weeks. From a military perspective, the line was designed not just to resist, but to endure, buying France time to mobilize its forces in the event of war. Yet from the start, the Maginot Line carried an assumption that would prove costly. It did not extend along France's border with Belgium. Political leaders argued that Belgium was an ally and that in any future war, France would advance into Belgian territory to meet a German attack. Strategically, this meant the Ardennes forest, a region of rough hills and dense woods, was left relatively unprotected. Military planners believed the terrain was too difficult for tanks, an error that would later prove catastrophic. When World War II erupted in 1939, the Maginot Line initially seemed to justify its existence. French troops occupied its tunnels and waited. For months, little happened on the Western Front in what became known as the Phony War. Then in May 1940, Germany struck, but instead of hammering directly against the Maginot Forts, German forces swept through Belgium and the Ardennes, bypassing the line entirely. What followed was one of history's most famous military collapses. German tanks and mechanized units poured through the Ardennes and advanced rapidly toward the French interior, cutting off armies that had marched into Belgium. The Maginot Forts, still fully manned, found themselves outflanked. Many continued to resist even after France itself was collapsing. Forts like Schonenburg fought for weeks under relentless bombardment, their tunnels protecting their garrisons as designed. In most cases, the ouvriers only surrendered after receiving direct orders from French high command. In that sense, the line itself was never truly defeated in combat. It was simply bypassed. After France's fall, the Germans inspected the line with great interest. They were impressed by its construction and later used parts of it for their own defenses. After the war, the French briefly modernized sections during the early Cold War when the prospect of a Soviet advance across Europe seemed real. But by the 1960s, nuclear weapons and new strategies rendered the Maginot Line obsolete. Most of its forts were abandoned, their tunnels left to decay. Today, the remains are a mixture of museum, ruin, and sealed mystery. Some sites like Hackenberg and Schönberg have been restored and are open to visitors. Tour guides lead people through dim galleries where ammunition carts still sit on narrow gauge tracks. Kitchens remain stocked with old enamel pots and bunks line the walls. In these preserved sections, the past feels tangible. Elsewhere, the tunnels are flooded or collapsed, their entrances welded shut for safety. Entire stretches are inaccessible, their contents unknown. That lingering inaccessibility has fueled speculation. Urban explorers whisper of sealed chambers filled with abandoned weapons or supplies of forgotten rail cars left deep in the galleries. Historians point out that construction was so vast and wartime records so incomplete that it is plausible parts of the network remain unmapped or undocumented. For locals in Alsace and Lorraine, the Maginot Line is part of the landscape, but also a reminder of unanswered questions. Farmers occasionally uncover old hatches while ploughing, and children once dared each other to slip into overgrown entrances. The tunnels also carry a cultural weight. The phrase Maginot Line has become shorthand for misplaced confidence, preparing for the last war instead of the next. Yet inside the tunnels, the story feels different. The forts worked as designed. Their thick walls resisted bombardment. Their garrisons endured and their guns fired until ordered silent. The failure was not in the engineering, but in the strategy. More than 90 years after construction began, the Maginot Line remains one of the largest underground fortresses ever created. Its tunnels stretch beneath fields and villages, some echoing with tourist footsteps, others sealed away in darkness. From the surface, the hills of eastern France appear peaceful, but beneath them lies a buried city built for a war that came from another direction. And while parts have been mapped and preserved, large portions remain inaccessible, their contents left to speculation. Were stockpiles abandoned in sealed rooms? Are there galleries that no one has entered since 1940? Until those questions are answered, the Maginot Line will remain both a triumph of engineering and one of the most mysterious tunnel systems in the world. From the forgotten tunnels of France, our path winds back to North America into the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Here, looming above the city of Colorado Springs, lies a peak that for decades has been at the very heart of America's defense strategy. At first glance, Cheyenne Mountain looks like just another craggy ridge in the Rockies, popular with hikers and tourists. But hidden inside, blasted deep into granite, is one of the most famous and formidable military bunkers ever built, the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The idea for Cheyenne Mountain was born in the height of Cold War paranoia. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was developing faster, longer-range missiles, and the US needed a command center that could survive a nuclear strike. If Congress had a luxury lifeboat beneath a resort, what else might be buried beneath the mountains, deserts, and plains of America? And there's the heart of the mystery. Was the Greenbrier bunker truly abandoned, or has it quietly evolved into something new? While the tourists focus on its history, some believe parts of the facility remain operational, upgraded with modern technology and held in reserve for emergencies. After all, the need for continuity of government hasn't disappeared, and the US has a long tradition of building backup command centers. Could it be that beneath the polished halls of the Greenbrier Resort, the blast doors still guard a living, breathing Cold War legacy, ready to be used at a moment's notice? It's an unsettling thought. Lawmakers enjoying a retreat in luxury, while below their feet lies a shadow government's refuge, waiting for the day the unthinkable happens. From the hidden blast doors of the Greenbrier, our journey shifts to somewhere very different, as beneath the rolling hills and sleepy villages of eastern France lies one of the most ambitious military projects ever attempted, the Maginot Line. At first glance, the countryside looks ordinary. Farmland, forests and small stone towns, but hidden underfoot is a labyrinth of tunnels, galleries, and fortified chambers stretching for hundreds of miles. Built in the shadow of one world war and destined to be tested in another, the Maginot Line was a fortress unlike anything that came before it. Even today, decades after its abandonment, large stretches remain sealed, unexplored, and cloaked in mystery. The origins of this subterranean fortress trace back to 1918. World War I had devastated France, leaving millions dead and much of its northeast in ruins. German armies had stormed across the border in 1914 and again in 1918, and the French government was determined never to allow such an invasion again. The memory of the trenches, of artillery barges leveling towns, and of poison gas drifting across battlefields was seared into the minds of French planners. So when the dust settled, they resolved to create a defense so formidable that no army could break through. The idea was not entirely new. For centuries, France had built fortresses along its borders, most famously the star-shaped citadels designed by Sébastien Le Rest d'Avibon in the 17th century. But by the 20th century, those walls were obsolete. Airplanes and long-range artillery could reduce them to rubble in days. The new generation of French engineers concluded that the only way to protect their forces was to hide them underground, beneath layers of reinforced concrete and earth. Planning for the Maginot Line began in the 1920s, and in 1929 construction formally commenced. It was named after André Maginot, France's Minister of War, who had fought and been wounded in World War I and became a passionate advocate for strong defenses. Over the next decade, tens of thousands of workers blasted, tunneled, and poured concrete across France's eastern frontier. By the late 1930s, an enormous underground system stretched from Switzerland in the south to Luxembourg in the north, covering France's most vulnerable border with Germany. The Maginot Line was not a single wall, but a series of heavily fortified complexes known as connected by underground galleries. Within these complexes lay barracks, ammunition stores, command posts, and artillery positions, all linked by tunnels wide enough to carry small electric trains. Soldiers could move safely underground from one part of a fort to another, even under bombardment. Above ground, reinforced gun turrets and observation posts protruded like steel mushrooms, able to retract into the earth when threatened. Life inside was surprisingly modern for the 1930s. Each fort was essentially a self-contained city. There were dormitories with bunk beds, kitchens equipped with coal and electric stoves, medical clinics, chapels, even cinemas in some larger. Generators supplied electricity, pumps provided fresh water, and massive ventilators filtered the air to protect against gas attacks. The tunnels maintained a steady temperature, cool in summer and warm in winter, and soldiers often joked that conditions underground were more comfortable than in regular army barracks. The garrisons ate hot meals, watched films and drilled in the tunnels while waiting for an attack that might never come. In terms of engineering, the line was formidable. Walls and ceilings were meters thick, designed to resist heavy artillery. Ammunition was stored deep underground and carried to the gun turrets by rail. Some of as many as 200 men stationed inside, supported by vast stockpiles of food and fuel that could last weeks. From a military perspective, the line was designed not just to resist, but to endure, buying France time to mobilize its forces in the event of war. Yet from the start, the Maginino Line carried an assumption that would prove costly. It did not extend along France's border with Belgium. Political leaders argued that Belgium was an ally and that in any future war, France would advance into Belgian territory to meet a German attack. Strategically, this meant the Ardennes Forest, a region of rough hills and dense woods, was left relatively unprotected. Military planners believed the terrain was too difficult for tanks, an error that would later prove catastrophic. When World War II erupted in 1939, the Maginot Line initially seemed to justify its existence. French troops occupied its tunnels and waited. For months, little happened on the Western Front in what became known as the Phony War. Then in May 1940, Germany struck, but instead of hammering directly against the Maginot Forts, German forces swept through Belgium and the Ardennes, bypassing the line entirely. What followed was one of history's most famous military collapses. German tanks and mechanized units poured through the Ardennes and advanced rapidly toward the French interior, cutting off armies that had marched into Belgium. The Maginot Forts, still fully manned, found themselves outflanked. Many continued to resist even after France itself was collapsing. Forts like Schonenburg fought for weeks under relentless bombardment, their tunnels protecting their garrisons as designed. In most cases, the ouvriers only surrendered after receiving direct orders from French high command. In that sense, the line itself was never truly defeated in combat. It was simply bypassed. After France's fall, the Germans inspected the line with great interest. They were impressed by its construction and later used parts of it for their own defenses. After the war, the French briefly modernized sections during the early Cold War when the prospect of a Soviet advance across Europe seemed real. But by the 1960s, nuclear weapons and new strategies rendered the Maginot Line obsolete. Most of its forts were abandoned, their tunnels left to decay. Today, the remains are a mixture of museum, ruin, and sealed mystery. Some sites, like Hackenberg and Schönberg, have been restored and are open to visitors. Tour guides lead people through dim galleries where ammunition carts still sit on narrow gauge tracks. Kitchens remain stocked with old enamel pots and bunks line the walls. In these preserved sections, the past feels tangible. Elsewhere, the tunnels are flooded or collapsed, their entrances welded shut for safety. Entire stretches are inaccessible, their contents unknown. That lingering inaccessibility has fueled speculation. Urban explorers whisper of sealed chambers filled with abandoned weapons or supplies of forgotten railcars left deep in the galleries. Historians point out that construction was so vast and wartime records so incomplete that it is plausible parts of the network remain unmapped or undocumented. For locals in Alsace and Lorraine, the Maginot Line is part of the landscape, but also a reminder of unanswered questions. Farmers occasionally uncover old hatches while ploughing, and children once dared each other to slip into overgrown entrances. The tunnels also carry a cultural weight. The phrase Maginot Line has become shorthand for misplaced confidence, preparing for the last war instead of the next. Yet inside the tunnels, the story feels different. The forts worked as designed. Their thick walls resisted bombardment. Their garrisons endured and their guns fired until ordered silent. The failure was not in the engineering, but in the strategy. More than 90 years after construction began, the Maginino Line remains one of the largest underground fortresses ever created. Its tunnels stretch beneath fields and villages, some echoing with tourist footsteps, others sealed away in darkness. From the surface, the hills of eastern France appear peaceful, but beneath them lies a buried city built for a war that came from another direction. And while parts have been mapped and preserved, large portions remain inaccessible, their contents left to speculation. Were stockpiles abandoned in sealed rooms? Are there galleries that no one has entered since 1940? Until those questions are answered, the Maginino Line will remain both a triumph of engineering and one of the most mysterious tunnel systems in the world. From the forgotten tunnels of France, our path winds back to North America, into the Rocky Mountains of Colorado. Here, looming above the city of Colorado Springs, lies a peak that for decades has been at the very heart of America's defense strategy. At first glance, Cheyenne Mountain looks like just another craggy ridge in the Rockies, popular with hikers and tourists. But hidden inside, blasted deep into granite, is one of the most famous and formidable military bunkers ever built, the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. The idea for Cheyenne Mountain was born in the height of Cold War paranoia. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was developing faster, longer-range missiles, and the US needed a command center that could survive a nuclear strike. The idea for Cheyenne Mountain was born in the height of Cold War paranoia. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union was developing faster, longer-range missiles, and the US needed a command center that could survive a nuclear strike. The answer was to go underground. Construction began in 1961, carving out a vast facility inside the mountain itself. What emerged over the next few years was a command post unlike anything else on Earth, a fortress meant to endure the apocalypse and keep the nerve center of the military functioning no matter what happened above. Everything about Cheyenne Mountain was designed for survival. Its entrances sealed by blast doors, each weighing 25 tons, so heavy that even today, closing them feels like shutting the lid on a vault. Inside, the entire facility was built on enormous steel springs capable of absorbing shockwaves from a nuclear blast. In other words, if the ground outside shook with the force of an atomic strike, the rooms inside would barely tremble. At full capacity, the complex could house over 1,000 people with enough supplies to keep them alive for months. It was quite literally a city inside a mountain. The heart of Cheyenne Mountain was NAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. From here, operators scanned radar screens for incoming missiles or aircraft ready to sound the alarm in case of an attack. In the Cold War era, every beep on the screen carried the weight of history. Was it a flock of geese? Or was it a Soviet bomber, a weather anomaly, or a nuclear launch? Lives and decisions rested on those interpretations, all while sealed inside granite walls designed to outlast Armageddon. Yet, Cheyenne Mountain wasn't just built for survival, it became an icon. Movies like War Games in the 1980s brought its shadowy halls into pop culture, and later, the long-running series Stargate SG-1 used the real facility as the fictional home of a secret portal to other worlds. The irony wasn't lost on the public. A place designed to track the skies and protect against nuclear war became famous as a setting for intergalactic travel. Fiction turned the bunker into a household name, and to this day, many people know Cheyenne Mountain more from Hollywood than from defense briefings. Of course, beneath the pop culture shine lies the reality of an incredibly secure and still somewhat mysterious base. Although the end of the Cold War in the 1990s led to NORAD moving much of its operation to nearby Peterson Air Force Base, Cheyenne Mountain was never truly abandoned. Officially, it went into warm standby, meaning the core systems were preserved and could be reactivated quickly if needed. In practice, it remained staffed and partially active. Over the years, reports surfaced that parts of the complex had been modernized, particularly its communication and control systems, which raises an obvious question. If the Cold War is over, why keep this mountain fortress alive? Some explanations are straightforward. The facility is still used as a backup command center, ready to take over in case primary bases are compromised. Its hardened structure makes it ideal for surviving not just nuclear strikes, but also natural disasters or cyber attacks that could less secure sites. Others believe Cheyenne Mountain may now play a role in monitoring newer threats, from missile defense to space surveillance. After all, in today's world, dangers don't only come from rival nations, but also from orbiting satellites, cyber warfare, and unpredictable rogue states. Then there's the deeper speculation. A facility this secure, this hardened, is almost too good to leave idle. Could there be operations inside that have never been acknowledged? Some suspect parts of the Mountain House classified projects, research labs, storage vaults, or command systems tied to technologies not made public. The secrecy is tight enough to keep such theories alive. Visitors allowed on official tours see only the mundane areas. Offices, conference rooms, hallways lined with thick concrete, but much of the facility remains off limits, its functions never openly explained. Personal accounts from those who worked inside add both credibility and mystery. Veterans describe the surreal feeling of stepping through the blast doors, leaving the daylight behind and spending days or weeks in a windowless underground city. The constant hum of machinery, the echo of footsteps in metal corridors, the knowledge that hundreds of feet of rock lay above. It created an atmosphere both safe and unsettling. One former officer recalled how during drills, the blast doors would be sealed and everyone inside would simply carry on, as if the world outside no longer mattered. For some, it was reassuring. For others, claustrophobic. The technology inside was constantly updated, but the bones of the Cold War design remain. Power plants, reservoirs of water, food stores, all designed to keep life going underground in the event of catastrophe. In that sense, Cheyenne Mountain is a time capsule of nuclear-era thinking. The belief that survival was possible, that command and control could continue even after the unthinkable. Walking its halls today would feel like stepping back into that mindset when humanity lived every day under the shadow of mushroom clouds. Yet Cheyenne Mountain also represents something stranger. Its prominence in films and TV shows blurred the line between fact and fiction. For years, fans of Stargate speculated about what else might be hidden in the mountain. Could its sealed chambers host experimental technology? Could parts of the base still be operating in ways the public has no clue about? The mystique of Cheyenne Mountain comes not just from its engineering, but from the cultural aura it has built up. An aura that suggests the truth could be stranger than the fiction it inspired. Today, the complex remains on guard, though in a quieter way. Official tours emphasize its history, while defense officials describe it as a backup site. But the fact that millions of dollars have been spent upgrading its communications in recent years raises eyebrows. Why invest in a facility supposedly in standby mode? The answers are vague, and perhaps deliberately so. It keeps the mystery alive. Cheyenne Mountain may no longer be the center of America's nuclear defenses, but it is not a relic either. It still hums with life, however silently. From the steel and granite fortress of Cheyenne Mountain, our path winds eastward to Moscow, where one of the world's most recognizable landmarks rises above the Moskva River. Tourists see the colorful domes of St. Basil's Cathedral nearby, the towers crowned with ruby stars and the immense red walls enclosing centuries of history. But while the Kremlin is famous as the public face of Russian power, what lies inside, and perhaps more importantly beneath, remains one of the world's great guarded mysteries. The Kremlin, as it stands today, is a layered fortress. Its walls stretching more than 2 kilometers, studded with 20 towers, some of which conceal gates and hidden passageways. The site has been a seat of power since medieval times, evolving from a wooden fort into the grand citadel we know now. Within its walls are palaces, cathedrals, government buildings, and even museums. a blend of Russian history and modern politics in one tightly secured compound. On the surface, it is both a cultural landmark and the working heart of the Russian government. But the security here is unlike any other tourist attraction. Armed guards patrol the perimeter. Surveillance systems track every movement, and access is limited to specific routes and zones. Behind the pageantry of military parades and official ceremonies lies a much deeper web of control. The Kremlin is not just guarded, it is fortified in layers with multiple police and intelligence services maintaining vigilance. Beyond the visible protection are elements the public rarely sees: restricted offices, secure communications hubs, and rumored underground escape routes designed for emergencies. Those escape routes are where history and legend blur. For centuries, stories have circulated about tunnels running beneath the Kremlin, some dating back to the time of the Tsars. Chronicles mention secret passages leading to the Moskva River, supposedly used by royals to flee during times of siege. Archaeological digs in the 20th century uncovered hints of medieval cellars and brick tunnels, suggesting the legends may have some basis in reality. During Stalin's reign, the network supposedly expanded dramatically. Known for his obsession with security, Stalin ordered the construction of deep underground bunkers across Moscow, including the famous Bunker 42, and it's widely believed that hidden tunnels link these facilities to the Kremlin itself. One persistent rumor speaks of a subterranean metro line nicknamed Metro 2, built parallel to Moscow's regular subway system. According to speculation, it connects the Kremlin to key sites across the city: intelligence headquarters, government command centers, and even Vnukovo Airport, though never officially confirmed. Multiple defectors and Soviet-era insiders have hinted at its existence. If true, it would mean that beneath the tourist crowds and ceremonial guards, a shadow transport network still hums quietly, designed to whisk leaders to safety in case of crisis. Inside the Kremlin walls, the contrast between what is visible and what is hidden adds to its aura. Above ground, visitors can tour the armory chamber filled with treasures from Russia's imperial past, crown jewels, Fabrea eggs, ceremonial armor. They can walk through cathedral squares where golden domes shine against the sky. Yet beneath those same cobblestones, secure command centers may still operate with reinforced rooms ready for nuclear-era contingencies. The duality is striking. A palace of culture and history layered over a fortress of secrecy. Even in modern times, the Kremlin has retained its mystery. Journalists allowed inside on official tours are kept to tightly controlled paths, rarely straying from the curated public image. Former workers occasionally hint at more, describing sealed doors in basement or corridors where only uniformed guards pass. One anecdote tells of repairmen being escorted to fix wiring, only to be blindfolded for part of the journey so they could not memorize the route. These fragments, whether embellished or not, only reinforce the sense that much of the Kremlin remains unseen. The symbolism of the Kremlin adds another dimension to its intrigue. For centuries, it has been the stage where power is displayed, whether through coronations, Soviet-era parades, or presidential addresses. But true power often hides itself. The very existence of rumored tunnels and secret chambers reflects a truth about the Kremlin. It has always been not just a place of governance, but a fortress designed to endure threats from without and within. It embodies both spectacle and survival. Historians note that during the Cold War, the Kremlin was more than a political symbol. It was the nerve center of a superpower locked in nuclear standoff. Secure communication lines ran through its halls, connecting directly to military command posts. If war had broken out, orders would have flowed from beneath its walls. Some even argue that this legacy continues today with modernized command facilities still operating out of sight. The Kremlin's guarded nature makes such claims difficult to verify, but its long history of secrecy ensures they will never fade completely. For ordinary Muscovites, the Kremlin is both familiar and untouchable. They pass it daily, see its towers dominate Red Square, and hear its bells mark the hours. Yet they also know it as the most off-limit space in the city, a place where entry is tightly controlled and where rumors of hidden depths circulate endlessly. One local joke even quips that Moscow has two metros, one for the people and one for the powerful. Tourists, meanwhile, often remark on the strange feeling of standing in Red Square, gazing at the ornate towers, knowing that just beyond the walls lies a labyrinth the world may never fully see. The Kremlin thrives on that tension, open enough to impress, closed enough to mystify. And that is why the Kremlin continues to rank among the world's most guarded places. It is not just soldiers or intelligence agents that guard it, but centuries of accumulated secrecy reinforced by legends of underground escape routes and hidden tunnels. A fortress for czars, generals, and presidents, it has always been as much about what is hidden as what is displayed. So the question that lingers is this: beneath those iconic red walls, beneath the palaces and cathedrals, what still hums in the darkness? Do the tunnels still stretch across Moscow, linking the Kremlin to bunkers and command posts? Or are some chambers sealed forever, their secrets locked away by the very history they once shaped? Leaving behind Moscow's fortified Kremlin, our path now winds to the rugged mountains of eastern Afghanistan, where stone cliffs rise like jagged teeth against the sky. Hidden within these peaks is one of the most infamous cave systems of modern times, Tora Bora. Mention the name and most people immediately think of Osama bin Laden, US bombs pounding the mountains and a frantic search for the world's most wanted man. But the story of Tora Bora goes far deeper than a single fugitive. It's a place where history, legend, and mystery collide, carved into the White Mountains in ways that are still not fully understood. The Tora Bora caves are located near the border with Pakistan, about 30 meters from Jalalabad. The name itself translates to black dust, a fitting description of the dark rock and powdery soil of the region. For centuries, these mountains have been used as hiding places and strongholds. Local tribes knew the caves well, relying on them for shelter and defense long before the modern world took notice. By the late 20th century, however, the system had been expanded into something far more formidable. During the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s, the caves became a strategic hub for Mujahideen fighters. With funding and support from outside powers, including the United States, they were fortified, expanded, and linked with networks of tunnels. Some reports claim entire complexes were carved out, storage areas for weapons, sleeping quarters, and hidden routes for moving men and supplies. By the time the Soviets withdrew, Tora had earned a reputation as nearly impregnable, a natural fortress improved by human hands. That reputation reached its peak in 2001 after the September 11th attacks. US forces launched their invasion of Afghanistan, and intelligence quickly pointed to Tora Bora as bin Laden's hideout. The caves were said to contain a warren of tunnels, some stretching for miles with chambers large enough to house vehicles and supplies. US officials described them as a mountain fortress complete with electricity, communication systems, and fortified positions. Whether those descriptions were exaggerated or not, the image stuck. A modern terrorist kingpin holed up in a medieval labyrinth. In December 2001, the battle for Tora Bora began. American and Allied forces bombarded the mountains with airstrikes, dropping hundreds of bombs and missiles onto the suspected hideouts. Ground forces moved in with the help of Afghan militias, sweeping the slopes and blasting entrances. The campaign was intense, but when it ended, bin Laden was nowhere to be found. Despite the destruction, many passages remained sealed or unexplored. Some collapsed under bombardment. Others were simply too dangerous or remote to enter. The result was an enduring mystery. Had bin Laden escaped through the mountains into Pakistan, or had he vanished into chambers the US never uncovered? The uncertainty gave rise to speculation. Some military analysts argued that the caves were far deeper and more elaborate than the public realized, with sealed-off tunnels that survived the bombing intact. A few even suggested that bin Laden could have remained hidden inside for weeks or months, protected by passages that were never mapped. Others noted that the Soviets had once tried to neutralize the caves with heavy bombing as well. Yet the system endured. If entire sections of Tora Bora remained untouched, what might still be hidden there? Stockpiles of weapons, abandoned supplies, or deeper chambers dating back centuries? First-hand accounts from soldiers add to the picture. Some describe moving through narrow tunnels barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, the air heavy with dust, the walls blackened by smoke from decades of fires. Others recall stumbling into larger caverns big enough to hold dozens of men with crude ventilation shafts cut into the rock. The sense of danger was constant, not just from enemy fighters, but from the caves themselves. A single grenade or a collapsing roof could wipe out a squad in an instant. One US officer later admitted that the caves felt endless, as though every tunnel explored only hinted at more hidden behind. The mythology of Tora Bora has only grown in the years since. Some conspiracy theories claim the caves once held hidden caches of advanced weapons supplied during the Cold War, possibly even Stinger missiles or heavy artillery still buried inside. Others speculate that parts of the complex were so deep they could serve as underground command centers, waiting to be rediscovered by whoever dares venture far enough. With little reliable mapping and most of the system still sealed or inaccessible, the truth remains elusive. Even locals who have lived in the shadow of Tora for generations tell stories of passages that stretch further than anyone dares to go. Some whisper about bottomless caves where explorers vanished. Others about chambers that feel ancient, predating even modern conflicts. Whether these are legends or fragments of truth is hard to say, but they add to the aura of a place already steeped in mystery. What makes Tora so compelling is how it blurs the line between natural wonder and human fortress. On one hand, it is a product of geology with caves formed over millennia. On the other, it has been shaped and weaponized by centuries of conflict, turned into a warren that can defy even the most advanced military campaigns. That combination makes it not just a battlefield, but a symbol of resilience, secrecy, and the limits of even modern power to fully uncover what lies below. And so the caves endure. Today, Tora is quieter, though not entirely at peace. Periodically, reports surface of militants using the caves again, slipping across the mountains, hiding in chambers that remain beyond reach. Efforts to fully map or seal the system have never succeeded, leaving open the possibility that large sections remain unexplored, which leaves us with the lingering question: did the world's most wanted man truly slip away across the border? Or did the mountains themselves hide him in passages no bomb or patrol could ever find? And beyond bin Laden, what other secrets remain sealed within the dark heart of Tora, waiting for the day they might be rediscovered? Tora Bora's shadowy caves lead us back across continents, this time to rolling fields in the American South. Kentucky, to be exact. Here, in an otherwise quiet stretch near the town of Elizabethtown, sits perhaps the most famous vault in the world. It doesn't look dramatic from the outside, just a squat granite fortress with a steel roof surrounded by fencing and military checkpoints. But say the name Fort Knox, and nearly everyone knows what it means. Unimaginable wealth, secrecy, and one of the tightest security systems ever built. Fort Knox, officially known as the United States Bullion Depository, was established in 1936 as a secure place to store the nation's gold reserves. At the time, the Great Depression had shaken economies worldwide, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt's administration was eager to safeguard America's wealth. Construction crews built a fortress-like structure of granite, reinforced concrete and steel capable of withstanding anything short of direct annihilation. Its location was no accident either. Situated on a military post already home to thousands of soldiers, the depository could rely on instant armed protection if needed. The security measures are legendary. The main vault door alone weighs more than 20 tons, requiring a complex system of multiple combinations held by different staff members. No single person knows the entire access code. Inside, compartmentalized locks control access to individual storage areas. The walls are reinforced with granite and concrete designed to withstand explosives, while the surrounding grounds bristle with fences, razor wire, and surveillance. Armed patrols and modern detection systems cover every angle. The airspace overhead is restricted, and the military presence around it ensures that Fort Knox is more than just a vault. It's a fortress within a fortress. For decades, Fort Knox has symbolized absolute security. In fact, the phrase "as secure as Fort Knox" has become shorthand for anything considered unreachable. Yet for all its fame, almost no one has ever seen inside. Even presidents aren't casually given tours. Franklin Roosevelt never entered after it was built. Dwight Eisenhower is said to have visited, and in 1974, members of Congress and the press were invited inside for a one-time inspection amid rumors that the vault was empty. But aside from that rare glimpse, the public has been kept entirely in the dark. That secrecy, of course, has fueled endless speculation. Officially, Fort Knox once held over 4,500 metric tons of gold, representing much of America's reserves. But skeptics argue that the vault may be largely empty, the gold sold or moved long ago. Conspiracy theories range from the plausible claims of accounting irregularities to the fantastic, suggesting that Fort Knox hides not just gold, but priceless artifacts. Some versions imagine ancient treasures like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant locked away alongside bullion. While such theories belong more to movies than reality, the mere fact that so few have ever set foot inside makes them difficult to completely dismiss. There's also a curious psychological aspect to Fort Knox's mystery, because access is denied to almost everyone. The image of the vault looms larger in the imagination than its actual contents. For Americans during the mid-20th century, it became a reassuring symbol. No matter how chaotic the world became, the gold at Fort Knox represented solidity and security. During World War II, the depository even stored more than bullion. It temporarily safeguarded the Magna Carta, the Gutenberg Bible, and the Declaration of Independence. While Washington, D.C. was considered vulnerable to attack, few people realized that for a time, some of the most important documents in Western history sat in the Kentucky hills. The 1974 inspection remains one of the strangest episodes in the Fort Knox story. Rumors had been circulating that the gold was gone, siphoned off, or secretly relocated. In response, a small group of congressmen and journalists were allowed inside. They were shown stacks of gold bars, touched them, and reported that the treasure was real. Yet, the event raised as many questions as it answered. Critics argued that the inspection was two-staged, that only a fraction of the vault was shown, and that it proved nothing about the overall reserves. To this day, there is no regular independent audit of Fort Knox, which means the speculation continues unchecked. Personal anecdotes from those who worked at the facility are scarce, but when they surface, they paint a picture of extreme compartmentalization. Guards describe never being allowed into the vault itself, their duties limited to the perimeter. Technicians recall maintaining systems without ever knowing what was truly being protected. This need-to-know culture ensures secrecy, but also feeds the mystique. How many people alive today have actually stood in the central chamber and seen the gold with their own eyes? The answer may be only a handful. Fort Knox has also left its mark on pop culture. It has appeared in countless films, most famously in the James Bond classic Goldfinger, where a villain attempts to irradiate the gold supply to disrupt the world economy. Cartoons, novels, and television shows have all used Fort Knox as a symbol of ultimate security, often exaggerating its defenses to near mythic levels. Laser grids, mows, even alligator pits. While the reality is less theatrical, the fact that the vault is already so secure makes it an easy springboard for the imagination. Then there are the practical mysteries. With the US dollar no longer tied directly to gold reserves since the 1970s, what role does Fort Knox truly play today? Some argue it's largely symbolic, a relic of a bygone era maintained as much for tradition as for actual necessity. Others contend that the bullion stored there still represents an important backstop, a guarantee of value in the event of global crisis. And of course, conspiracy theorists argue that the true role of Fort Knox is something else entirely, that it may house weapons, secret research materials, or treasures far more exotic than gold. Adding to the intrigue are whispers that parts of Fort Knox are regularly updated, surveillance systems are reportedly modernized, new detection equipment installed, and procedures revised. If the vault were empty, some ask, why bother? Why maintain one of the most expensive and secure facilities on Earth for no reason? It's a question that continues to fuel speculation, especially as no one outside the government can verify the truth. For the town of Elizabethtown and the surrounding region, Fort Knox has always been both a source of pride and a kind of silent neighbor. Locals know the roads patrolled by guards, the fences bristling with warnings, and the low, squat fortress visible in the distance. Few ever get close and fewer still have reason to, yet its presence looms, a constant reminder that something enormously valuable, or perhaps enormously secret, lies within. In the end, Fort Knox is both exactly what it seems and something more. Officially, it is the world's most secure treasure chest, guarding stacks of bullion that represent the wealth of a nation. But in the shadows, it is also a stage for speculation, a blank canvas onto which people project their ideas about secrecy, power, and hidden treasure. Whether it is filled with gold bars, priceless artifacts, or nothing at all, the mystery remains part of its strength. After the legendary reputation of Fort Knox, it feels only natural to cross the Atlantic and step into the heart of London, where another treasure chamber sits hidden beneath the city's oldest financial institution. On the surface, the Bank of England is a grand building on Threadneedle Street, its neoclassical walls looming over the financial district like a temple to money itself. But below those marble halls lies something far more intriguing. A labyrinth of vaults said to hold billions in gold bars stacked in rows that stretch further than the eye can see. The Bank of England has been safeguarding the nation's wealth since 1694, but its underground vaults have become the stuff of legend. Deep beneath the city, reinforced chambers house not just Britain's reserves, but also gold belonging to other countries and central banks. In total, the vaults reportedly hold over 400,000 bars, making it one of the largest gold repositories in the world. Each bar weighs around 12 kilos, and collectively, the piles beneath London represent hundreds of billions of pounds worth of value. To visualize it, imagine walking through endless rows of shelving where each book is a gold brick, the weight of history itself pressing down from every direction. Of course, wealth on that scale demands extraordinary security. Entry to the vaults requires passing through layers of reinforced steel doors, monitored corridors and checkpoints where only the most carefully vetted staff are permitted. The locks themselves are almost theatrical. Keys are said to be more than 3 feet long, almost like something out of a medieval castle rather than a modern bank. But these keys are only part of a system that includes electronic verification, seismic detectors that can sense the faintest vibration, and guards trained to notice even the smallest irregularity. For ordinary Londoners walking above, the thought that such treasure lies directly beneath their feet is almost surreal. Despite its importance, remarkably little has ever been seen of the vaults. The Bank of England has released only a handful of official images. Rows of gold bars under fluorescent lights, an almost clinical atmosphere of wealth and secrecy. That scarcity of evidence fuels the mystery. If the vaults really hold so much, why not prove it more often? Skeptics suggest the reserves might be exaggerated, pointing to the lack of independent audits or detailed public disclosures. Just as with Fort Knox, the absence of access creates a fertile breeding ground for speculation. There are anecdotes that add to the vault's mystique. One visitor in the 1930s, reportedly a senior official, described being almost overwhelmed by the sheer weight of gold, the air feeling thicker inside the chambers, as though the metal itself pressed down on the atmosphere. Another story, perhaps apocryphal, claims that during the Second World War, staff slept in the vaults on camp beds to ensure the gold was never left unattended, even as bombs fell on London. Whether true or not, the idea of men and women huddled among stacks of gold as the Blitz raged above perfectly captures the vault's role as the ultimate last line of security. The vaults are also central to Britain's role in the global economy. Countries around the world store gold in London, trusting the Bank of England's reputation and security. Some governments even conduct gold transactions by simply shifting ownership of bars that never leave the vault. A central bank in Asia might sell 1,000 bars to a European counterpart, and the only thing that changes is the name on the paperwork. In this way, the vaults aren't just storage. They're the invisible engine behind international trade, yet questions linger. How much gold is truly down there? Are the official numbers accurate, or are they a carefully maintained illusion? The secrecy once again ensures we can't be certain. Even parliamentarians have occasionally pressed for more transparency, only to receive vague assurances that everything is accounted for. And the unusual design of the keys, the archaic appearance of the doors, and the scarcity of photographs all add to the sense that this is less a simple vault and more a hidden world. Beneath the city, visitors who have managed to step inside often describe the experience with a mixture of awe and unease. The rows of bars glitter under sterile lights, but the silence is heavy, broken only by footsteps echoing against steel and stone. One journalist, who was allowed in for a brief tour, admitted that touching a gold bar was both thrilling and strangely anticlimactic, holding a piece of immense value that felt in the hand like nothing more than a very dense brick. But the true weight, he said, was psychological. Standing among so much concentrated wealth makes you realize how arbitrary and yet how powerful the idea of money really is. And then there are the myths. Some claim the vaults conceal more than just bullion. Perhaps historic treasures hidden away during times of war, or even artifacts never returned to their original owners. With centuries of empire and conflict behind it, it's not hard to imagine the bank's vaults doubling as storage for items far more symbolic than financial. The lack of access ensures that such theories can never be fully disproved, and so the Bank of England vaults remain what they've always been, the invisible foundation of Britain's financial empire, hidden in the depths below Threadneedle Street. Above ground, bankers, tourists, and politicians go about their business. Below, in the cool silence, sits row after row of gold, guarded by steel doors taller than a man and keys longer than your arm. London's gold-lined labyrinth is impressive enough, but our trail now takes us far north beyond the Arctic Circle, where mountains of stone and ice conceal a vault with a very different kind of treasure. On a remote Norwegian archipelago called Svalbard, there's a doorway cut into the side of a mountain, its angular concrete facade jutting out of the permafrost like a piece of modernist sculpture. Lit by a strip of cold blue light, it looks almost alien against the snow. This is the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, often nicknamed the Doomsday Vault. It doesn't guard gold or currency, but something arguably far more valuable: the future of life on Earth. The concept is simple but profound. The Seed Vault is a backup system for humanity's agriculture. Inside its frozen chambers, millions of seed samples from nearly every corner of the world are stored in carefully catalogued packets. Wheat from the Middle East, rice from Asia, maize from the Americas, rare heirloom plants from remote villages, all sealed, labeled, and tucked away on steel shelving deep within the mountain. If war, climate change, disease, or disaster ever wiped out a crop, these seeds could be withdrawn, planted, and used to restart food systems. In other words, it's a safety net for civilization, a kind of insurance policy against extinction. Wired location is everything. The islands lie midway between Norway and the North Pole in a zone of permanent permafrost. Even if the cooling systems failed, the frozen Earth would keep the seeds preserved for decades, perhaps centuries. The region is also geologically stable, far from earthquakes or volcanic hotspots. And politically, Svalbard is governed by an international treaty that allows multiple nations to cooperate, making it an ideal neutral ground for something that serves all humanity. Security, unsurprisingly, is tight. Access is restricted to a handful of approved scientists and officials. There's no wandering tourist entrance, no guided tours. Visitors are stopped at the door, which itself is a massive reinforced structure built to withstand explosions or attempted breaches. Beyond lies a tunnel extending into the mountain, leading to 3 separate storage chambers. Each is climate-controlled, kept at 18 degrees C with shelves stacked floor to ceiling in neat rows. Cameras, motion detectors, and layered lock systems ensure that no one enters without authorization. And yet, the seed vault doesn't just inspire awe, it sparks speculation. Because while its stated purpose is to preserve biodiversity, the secrecy around its operations has led some to wonder, is that all it holds? Conspiracy theories suggest that the vault may also safeguard genetic data, DNA samples, or even classified research intended for future use. The fact that some of the world's wealthiest organizations and governments contributed to its funding has only fueled the theories. If it really is just seeds, why the extraordinary precautions? Why such global interest? Of course, there are practical answers. Seeds are the foundation of human survival, and their loss would mean famine on a scale we can hardly imagine. Having a secure, centralized reserve makes sense, but even knowing that, the atmosphere of the vault invites other interpretations. With its stark design, remote setting, and controlled access, it feels less like a seed bank and more like the set of a science fiction film. The visual alone, an illuminated doorway glowing in the endless Arctic night, has led people to joke that it's less about farming and more about guarding alien technology. What makes the seed vault particularly interesting is how rarely it's actually accessed. Most of the time, the doors remain closed, the seeds frozen in silence. Only in moments of crisis are withdrawals made. In 2015, for example, scientists in Syria retrieved seeds from the vault to re-establish crops destroyed by war. That was one of the first real-world uses of the vault, proof that it wasn't just symbolic, but genuinely practical. Still, such withdrawals are rare. For the most part, the seeds lie undisturbed, waiting for a future we hope never comes. The vault also raises questions about ownership. While it's managed by the Norwegian government and supported by global organizations, each deposit remains the property of the country or group that sent it. That means shelves in Svalbard hold the agricultural heritage of dozens of nations side by side, locked in one of the most secure facilities on Earth. In a way, it's both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it shows cooperation across borders. Unsettling because so much of our survival rests on a single remote facility most of us will never see. Personal accounts from those who have entered the vault often emphasize the strangeness of the experience. Scientists describe walking through the icy corridors, breath misting in the cold, as row upon row of shelves disappear into the distance. One visitor called it a library of life. Each packet, a story of generations who cultivated those crops, passed down seeds, and eventually sent them to the Arctic for safekeeping. Others note the eerie silence. There are no guards patrolling inside. No sounds except the hum of machinery and the crunch of boots on frozen ground. And then there's the symbolism. Above ground, the world churns with politics, conflict, and uncertainty. Below, in a frozen cavern, humanity's future is locked away with methodical precision. It's a reminder of how fragile our systems are and how much thought has gone into preparing for collapse. But it also begs the question, What future disaster do we expect so strongly that we've built a vault to outlast it? Is it nuclear war, climate catastrophe, or something we can't yet predict? Svalbard Seed Vault is not just a storage facility. It's a statement. It says we know our world is vulnerable, that our food systems could fail, and that we're willing to prepare for the worst. At the same time, its remoteness and secrecy mean it will likely always carry an aura of mystery. Whether you see it as humanity's greatest insurance policy or a vault for secrets beyond seeds, its presence on that frozen island is a constant reminder of the delicate balance we live in. And that brings us to the end of our journey through some of the most heavily guarded and secretive places on Earth. From vaults of gold and seeds to mountains hollowed out for war and islands locked away by nature, each one reminds us just how much of our world remains out of reach. Hidden behind doors we'll never open, but now I want to hear from you. What do you think? Which of these locations fascinates you the most? And are there others you believe should be on this list? Drop your theories and suggestions in the comments. I'd love to see where your curiosity takes you. Thanks for joining us once again. And as always,